Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Michael van Eck. Michael van Eck was born on August 14, 1987, in a city that was once a hub for gold miners. He was the only son among four sisters, Natasha, Michelle, Bianca, and Friana, and grew up in a close-knit family. His parents were caring and provided a comfortable life for their children. Michael's father worked hard to establish his own business, while his mother created a nurturing environment at home that encouraged the growth and development of her children. Michael was a sociable and kind person who excelled in school and sports, earning a black belt in karate that gave him confidence. After completing his education, Michael trained as an electrician, a highly sought-after profession that offered good earnings and job prospects. He worked at the Beatrix mine in the small town of Unison, where he was employed at mine number 4. Not content to rest on his laurels, Michael continued his education to become an engineer. In 2011, Michael, then 23 years old, joined a dating site to cope with a recent breakup and expand his social circle. It seemed like a stroke of luck when he came across the profile of a sweet and smiling young woman that caught his eye. During the ongoing conversation, the man discovered that they shared common interests. Similar to him, she disliked loud parties and excessive drinking, and sought a genuine, meaningful relationship and a strong family foundation. Michael was pleasantly surprised to find a compatible match online. Living with his parents at the time, he shared his excitement and concerns with his mother. On April 2nd, he confided in her about his upcoming date and made an effort to prepare and make a good impression. He withdrew his first paycheck of 1,000 Rand from his account. The only thing that gave him pause was the unusual location his online friend had chosen for their first meeting, the city cemetery. To avoid worrying his parents, he kept this detail to himself. Around 9 p.m. that evening, Michael bid farewell to his family and left the house. He drove to the designated location in his silver Pajero 2007, a gift from his parents for his 18th birthday. As expected, she was running a bit late, but her appearance was striking. She from the internet arrived dressed in a pristine white dress and smiled warmly. The conversation flowed easily, and afterwards, she suggested continuing the evening elsewhere in the cemetery. She invited him to a secluded area with a blanket spread out on the grass, accompanied by a basket of fruit and wine. Michael and his friends had just finished their drinks when his beautiful companion suddenly kissed him. At first, the kiss was pleasant, but it quickly turned into a painful and horrific experience. Unbeknownst to Michael, this kiss was the beginning of a sinister plot. Chane van Heerden was born in 1991 to parents who were struggling in their marriage. When her mother discovered she was pregnant, they decided to put their divorce on hold and try to work through their issues. However, their efforts were unsuccessful, and the situation at home continued to deteriorate. Unfortunately for Chane, her mother resented her presence, seeing her as a constant reminder of her unhappy marriage. Even after the divorce, Chane's mother held on to her negative feelings, making it difficult for Chane to feel loved and accepted. Chane's behavioral issues and cold demeanor towards her children persisted even after her marriage ended. As a result, her 3 children felt isolated and misunderstood, with Chane, in particular, struggling the most. From a young age, she became withdrawn and sullen, displaying psychological problems. Her behavior became increasingly disturbing, as she frequently talked about death and created confusing artwork. She also developed an imaginary friend named Azael. Her grandparents, concerned about her well-being, suspected she might be possessed and took her to church for an exorcism. During the ritual, Chane's body convulsed, which was likely due to her fear of crowds and the intense anxiety she felt during the ordeal, possibly triggering an epileptic seizure. The traumatic experience had a lasting impact on her memory, causing her to develop a deep-seated fear of the dark. This phobia was further exacerbated by her mother's frightening statement that toys come to life at night, leading Chane to take drastic measures to protect herself, such as taping her doll's eyes shut and restraining them with shoelaces. Chane's mental condition took a turn for the worse as she entered preteen years. At 10 years old, she had a disturbing episode where she threatened a family guest with a knife while visiting her father. This incident prompted her family to seek professional help, and she was evaluated by a specialist who prescribed sedatives. The medication had a positive impact on her mood and overall well-being for a time. During a period of calm, Chane's father made a conscious effort to spend more time with her, often picking her up from school and taking her on hunting trips. He hoped that by sharing his hobby, he could provide her with the attention and connection she craved. Chane found enjoyment in her father's activities, particularly in tasks like butchering and skinning animals. However, this fascination led her to begin collecting and bringing home the carcasses of small animals, starting with rats and birds, and escalating to cats and dogs. She also took to cutting flesh and occasionally self-inflicted injuries. As it turned out, around age 12, Chane had befriended a man who introduced her to substance use and took advantage of her vulnerability. Fortunately, she ended the toxic relationship on her own, although her sisters had initially kept the situation hidden from their parents. Chane's emotional state was negatively affected by her chaotic childhood. At the age of 15, her mother left for New Zealand, where she started a new relationship and never returned to care for her children. Chane and her siblings were left in the care of their father and stepmother, who did their best to provide for them, but struggled to understand the depth of Chane's emotional issues. Her family initially attributed her behavior to typical teenage struggles. However, her situation took a turn for the worse when she became involved with a 22-year-old man who was interested in Satanism, occultism, and voodoo cults. He had a profound influence on Chane, but his cruel nature often left her feeling belittled and suppressed. Fortunately, Chane's life began to turn around with the support of her family and therapy. By the time she turned 17, she had distanced herself from the negative influences in her life, graduated from high school, and enrolled in college to study art and graphic design. As she lost interest in Satanism and stopped using substances that were harming her, her emotional well-being began to improve. Chane thrived in her studies and landed a job in her field, where she received support from both her colleagues and management. She discovered a natural talent for visual arts, earning her respect and recognition in her profession. At the same time, she began a romantic relationship with a man named Warren. To those outside her inner circle, Chane's life seemed perfectly ordinary. Her family and close friends avoided discussing her past, hoping that the difficult times were behind her. However, it was unclear what was happening beneath the surface. It's possible that her inner struggles were simply waiting to resurface. Her father, in particular, was overjoyed for Chane, believing she had finally found stability and would soon get married. However, his expectations were not fulfilled. A surprising challenge arose from Warren's friend Roy, a self-proclaimed sensitive person. Although Chane came across as kind and friendly, Roy detected something off-putting and even evil about her. He suspected that Chane might be unfaithful to his friend, so he decided to confront her about it. However, instead of answering his question, Chane became enraged and spat in his face, telling him to stop asking her ridiculous questions. At a party, Chane noticed Martin, a 24-year-old from a well-respected family. Despite his calm and sociable nature, rumors surrounded him. Born into a privileged family, Martin had a happy childhood, excelling academically and behaving well. However, at 6, he began experiencing hallucinations, convinced by an entity that he possessed incredible strength. As he grew older, his mental health declined, and his behavior changed due to struggles at school and home. At 14, Martin was hospitalized for psychiatric treatment and diagnosed with schizophrenia. Unfortunately, standard treatments were ineffective. His financially secure family dedicated themselves to finding alternative medications, eventually discovering the necessary drugs to control his condition, except for occasional aggressive outbursts. Martin was deeply affected by witnessing a stray cat being attacked by dogs. Instead of feeling revulsion or sympathy, he chose to hide the cat's body and observe it. This disturbing incident marked the beginning of his animal torture. He eventually dropped out of school and started working with his father in the carpentry shop, aspiring to follow in his family's footsteps. As he worked, his condition showed signs of improvement, and he lost the desire to harm animals. Feeling in control, he made the decision to stop taking his medication, despite concerns from those around him. However, this decision ultimately proved to be a grave mistake. Martin's mental state gradually declined, and it was during this time that he met Chane. Their relationship seemed happy and normal to outsiders, and their parents were initially pleased with their union. But neither set of parents was aware of the dark history of their children, and their relationship ultimately led to devastating consequences. Initially, they was outgoing and social, attending parties and interacting with others. However, acquaintances began to notice cuts on their hands, which they jokingly attributed to intimate experiments. Over time, they became increasingly reclusive and developed an interest in dark and occult practices, including Satanism and voodoo cults. They also became fascinated with notorious serial killers. In February 2011, Martin posted a photo of himself and Chane on social media, with the caption, "Killers," accompanied by a cryptic emoji. At the time, no one suspected that the post was anything more than a joke. Meanwhile, Martin asked Chane's father for permission to marry her, which was met with enthusiasm. However, unbeknownst to those around them, they harbored a sinister secret. Instead of dreaming of a future together, they fantasized about ending their lives in a violent manner. These dark fantasies eventually evolved into a twisted plan to torture and kill homeless individuals. They even practiced their twisted intentions on animals, due to unable to find a suitable human victim to carry out their heinous plan. Chane created a profile on a dating site, which caught the attention of a young man named Michael Van Eck. Chane and her partner, Martin, targeted Michael for their sinister plans. They began flirting with Michael online, and after a few days, Chane suggested they meet in person. Despite the unusual location, Michael agreed to the meeting. Chane and Martin carefully planned the encounter, considering every detail, including their attire and the means to commit a crime. Chane approached the meeting prepared, while Martin hid behind tombstones, waiting for a signal. When Chane kissed Michael, it was the agreed-upon signal for Martin to attack. He struck Michael with a knife from behind, but Michael unexpectedly resisted. Chane intervened, and together they inflicted around 30 knife wounds on Michael. As Michael begged for an end to his suffering, Martin slit his throat, ultimately killing him. The perpetrators then dragged the body onto a blanket and began to carry out their plan. They cut off the victim's legs at the knee and severed his head. The dismembered body parts were placed in bags. The perpetrators attempted to bury the body at the site, but they encountered a problem that they had no shovels. As a result, they were forced to dig a shallow grave using only their hands and knives. After managing to bury the body only halfway, the perpetrators left the scene, taking the severed body parts with them. They used the victim's vehicle to make their getaway, with Martin initially driving, but later handing over control to his accomplice. However, the adrenaline rush from their crime made it difficult for them to focus on the road. Once they arrived home, they stored the bags containing the body parts in the refrigerator, treating them like ordinary groceries. After Martin had somewhat composed himself, he got into the victim's car and drove it to a high-crime neighborhood, hoping that it would be stolen. He left the car unlocked with the keys in the ignition to make it an easy target. A cemetery worker noticed bloody stains and torn clothing in the bushes near the grave. After alerting his supervisor, they called the authorities to report the gruesome find. The police were immediately notified, and an investigation was launched. Meanwhile, Michael Van Eck's parents were frantic with worry. Their son had been unreachable since the previous evening, which was unusual, even if he had stayed overnight with his internet girlfriend. When Michael failed to show up for work, his employer called his parents to ask about his absence. Around the same time, police received a report about an abandoned car with blood stains on the trunk. The vehicle was identified as belonging to Michael Van Eck through a database search. Further investigation revealed that the car had been parked at the cemetery for an extended period. With this new information, police officers visited the Van Eck residence, where they confirmed their suspicions. Michael's mother had been searching for him since the previous day. The officers then asked her to come to the cemetery, where forensic experts and search dogs were working to locate missing body parts. The investigation revealed that the victim's mother identified her son's body through distinctive burn marks he had sustained in childhood. The autopsy confirmed that the victim had suffered multiple knife wounds and showed signs of a struggle. The body had been dismembered after death, which suggested that the perpetrators had some level of expertise in this area. The number and nature of the wounds, as well as the strength required to subdue the victim, indicated that multiple attackers were involved. DNA testing later confirmed the identity of the victim as 23-year-old Michael Van Eck. During the investigation, police seized the victim's cell phone and computer, which revealed that the last person he had communicated with was Chane van Heerden. According to their messages, she had invited him to meet at the cemetery on the night of his death. Detectives brought Chane in for questioning, and she arrived with her boyfriend, Martin. Both were interviewed separately and eventually confessed to being involved in the victim's murder. Upon learning of the incident, Chane's father rushed to the station, where he was shocked to hear the accusations against his daughter. When he asked her if the allegations were true, Chane calmly confirmed her involvement and stated that she would willingly do it again. She claimed that she had fantasized about committing such a crime ever since she started hunting with her father. This cruel confession shocked not only her father but also everyone present. As the case gained public attention, Chane's boyfriend, Martin, also showed no remorse. Instead, he seemed to enjoy the public scrutiny and posed for cameras. It became clear that neither Chane nor Martin felt any regret for their actions. Investigations revealed that they had planned to take their own lives if caught, but Martin's changed his mind, and Chane followed suit. They wanted to live a life of notoriety, embracing their dark impulses. A search of their apartment revealed a disturbing environment. The walls were adorned with distorted portraits of Chane, depicting her without eyes, mouth, or ears. The rooms also contained ritual items, animal scalps, knives, and other objects of unclear purpose. Police found the deceased young man's belongings, including his glasses and wallet, which Martins later confessed they had taken to prepare their next crime. The most disturbing discovery was made in the refrigerator, where police found Michael's severed head with his mouth sewn shut. It is believed that the perpetrators intended to use his head as a ritualistic bowl. The victim's eyes and ears were found in separate containers. Additionally, the victim's hand and leg were discovered buried near the murderer's home, alongside the remains of various animals. The perpetrator's diary revealed horrific thoughts and plans for future crimes. The evidence collected during the investigation made it clear that the perpetrators had planned to commit multiple crimes, and that the process of taking lives and mutilating bodies brought them immense pleasure. Martin and Chane underwent multiple evaluations to assess their mental competence. The commission confirmed that they were aware of their actions and understood the consequences. In November 2011, Chane's trial took place. Despite this being her first offense, she was treated as a serial offender. She openly expressed her desire to repeat her actions and told the court that she understood she should feel shame or remorse, but couldn't. She could only comprehend the severity of her actions through societal standards and the reactions of others. Psychiatrists diagnosed Chane with psychopathic and antisocial disorders, which made her more dangerous than her boyfriend. However, she was skilled at hiding her true nature. Throughout the sentencing, Chane remained impassive. She was found guilty and sentenced to 35 years in prison without the possibility of parole, 20 years for taking a life and an additional 15 years for robbery and dismemberment. Martin defended himself in court, claiming he didn't remember the events until he was in jail. He admitted to studying Satanism and occultism, and said his relationship with Chane led them to commit the crime. He apologized to the victim's parents, but his words seemed insincere. He was found guilty and sentenced to 35 years in prison, with a chance for parole after serving half his sentence. Even in prison, Martin expressed his passion for Chane in letters, calling her a dark goddess. However, Chane eventually ended the relationship, feeling they had grown apart. While incarcerated, Chane proved to be a model prisoner, using her time to teach art and theology to her fellow inmates. In contrast, Martin, while also in prison, gained a small group of admirers who were carefully monitored by police to prevent them from copying his crimes. During his imprisonment, Martin's focused on personal growth, completing his education through correspondence courses and undergoing therapy. Their stories serve as a warning that ordinary individuals can hide dark secrets. Michael, a kind and compassionate person, was manipulated by two individuals with twisted motivations. This tragic event emphasizes the importance of being cautious about the people we surround ourselves with, as their influence can have a profound and lasting impact on our lives. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Lindsay Cutshall. Lindsay Cutshall was born in 1982 in the small town of White Eyes, Ohio, to a devoutly Christian family. Her father was a pastor, and she was raised with strong religious values. Despite her strict upbringing, Lindsay was an adventurous and active child who enjoyed sports and later developed a passion for hiking and extreme tourism. After completing her education, Lindsay attended Appalachian Bible College in West Virginia, where she honed her outdoor skills. She regularly went on hikes, climbed mountains, and rafted down rivers, often organizing her own expeditions. Lindsay's dream was to establish a summer camp for children and teenagers, where she could teach them wilderness survival skills, rafting, and other outdoor activities. Jason Allen was born in 1978 in Zeeland, Michigan, to a deeply religious family. As a teenager, he became fascinated with hiking and wilderness survival. Jason was a tall, athletic, and charismatic individual who possessed natural leadership qualities, which drew like-minded people to him. He was passionate about exploring new heights and mastering outdoor skills. Lindsay and Jason met in 2002 during a hiking trip in the Appalachian Mountains. At the time, Lindsay was still a student, while Jason worked as a mountain guide and climbing instructor. They quickly formed a connection after meeting for the first time, leading the young man to ask for her hand in marriage just 6 months later. Both sets of parents gave their approval, and the young man proposed to his girlfriend with a beautiful diamond ring. Shortly after, he gave her a second engagement ring. As a couple, they made ambitious plans for their future. They intended to get married in September 2004 and buy a spacious house to raise a family. But things didn't turn out as expected. Before their wedding, they worked as senior counselors at a Christian summer camp called Rock and Water in California's El Dorado County. Their goal was to gain experience and eventually open their own camp after the wedding. On the Friday evening of August 14th, Lindsay and Jason decided to take a weekend trip to the San Francisco area. Before leaving, they informed their colleagues of their plans and left 2 experienced counselors in charge of the camp, ensuring a smooth transition. They told everyone they would return by Monday, expecting no issues for either themselves or their temporary replacements. With their plan in place, they set off in Lindsay's 1992 red Ford Tempo, and unfortunately, This was the last time anyone saw them alive. By Sunday evening, Jason and Lindsay, both counselors, had not returned to camp, but their absence did not raise immediate concern. It was assumed they would arrive late that night or early Monday. However, when they failed to appear at the Monday morning roll call at 8 a.m. and their phones were unreachable, their colleagues grew worried. The group quickly notified the police and then reached out to Jason and Lindsay's families to inform them about the situation. The parents went to the camp right away to get more information about the incident. Their colleagues were particularly concerned because Jason and Lindsay were known for their reliability and punctuality. If they had encountered any issues, they would have likely found a way to communicate. Upon arriving at the camp, law enforcement officials began questioning their colleagues, but the investigation quickly hit a roadblock. No one knew exactly where Jason and Lindsay had gone. They had planned to explore the San Francisco area, but their love for adventure and extreme activities made it likely that they were in a remote location with no access to communication or civilization. The police decided to wait for 48 hours, allowing the missing couple a window to possibly return home by themselves. In the meantime, concerned relatives and friends didn't want to delay any longer, and therefore decided to start searching. They reached out to everyone in their network, trying to gather information about the last time someone had contact with they. A missing person flyer featuring a photo of they was circulated, asking witnesses to report any potential sightings right away. By Tuesday, law enforcement had joined the search. The main focus was on the San Francisco area, its surrounding suburbs, and nearby localities. However, the large terrain made it challenging to thoroughly search every inch. A friend's insight that they frequently visited the secluded and picturesque rocky beaches led the police to concentrate on these locations. As the search effort dragged on for days, with several bodies found in sleeping bags in the targeted areas, the likelihood of finding they alive decreased significantly. On Wednesday, August 19th, a helicopter patrol spotted 2 bodies in sleeping bags on a remote rocky beach, indicating that the individuals were likely deceased rather than just resting. Upon arriving at the scene, police found a red Ford Tempo parked near a tourist shelter and a steep trail leading to a scenic beach. The car was identified as belonging to missing student Lindsay Cutshall after a database check. As officers descended the trail, they discovered 2 people in sleeping bags, who initially appeared to be sleeping. However, they did not respond to calls or noise. Closer inspection revealed that the individuals, a young man and woman, were deceased, with no signs of life. Preliminary examination suggested that they had been killed by gunshot wounds to the head, and the smell of decomposition indicated they had been there for over a day. All of their belongings, including phones, wallets, bank cards, and cash, were found next to them, ruling out robbery as a motive. The car keys were also visible, eliminating car theft as a motive. Investigators initially believed the deceased were the young couple who had gone missing near San Francisco the previous week. Documents found at the scene confirmed the identities of the victims as Lindsay Cutshall and Jason Allen. However, formal identification by their relatives was still necessary. When the parents arrived, they were overcome with grief upon recognizing the bodies of their children. The investigation led police to rule out initial theories of robbery or carjacking due to the presence of untouched valuables, money, and keys at the scene. Forensic analysis also showed no signs of physical or intimate assault on the bodies, except for the fatal gunshot wounds to the head. It appeared that Lindsay and Jason were peacefully sleeping and did not have time to react to the attack. They showed no signs of trying to defend themselves, escape, or even get out of their sleeping bags, indicating a sudden and deliberate act that was similar to an execution or a revenge killing. The brutal murder of 2 individuals on a secluded beach left investigators with many questions but no clear answers. The beach was difficult to access, and there were no signs of anyone else being in the area. Despite a thorough search, no shell casings were found, leading investigators to believe that the shooter may have taken them or thrown them into the ocean. The fact that the shots were fired at close range into the victim's head suggested that the casings should have been nearby if they hadn't been deliberately moved. A search of the area revealed an empty beer bottle a few meters from the crime scene. This was notable because Lindsay and Jason did not drink alcohol and led a healthy lifestyle, suggesting that the bottle may have belonged to the shooter. The brand of beer was unusual for the area and was more commonly found in a neighboring state. Although it was unclear whether the bottle was connected to the crime, it was considered a significant lead in the investigation. A theory emerged that Lindsay and Jason may have had a confrontation with someone the day before their deaths, and this person may have returned at night with a gun to settle the dispute. Although Jason and Lindsay were known for being friendly, it was possible they may have unknowingly offended someone. Additionally, the shooter may have been intoxicated or mentally unstable. Examination of the bullets found in the victim's skulls showed they came from a rare Marlin rifle, specifically a .45 caliber Model 18, produced in 1994 by Marlin Firearms Company. This type of rifle was typically used for hunting and was often part of a collector's arsenal. This discovery was a significant lead in the investigation, but it remained the only concrete clue at the time. Investigation suggested that the shooter was likely a lone male. He may have been a hunter, collector, or gun enthusiast. To further the investigation, authorities aimed to reconstruct their final route, identify who they may have contacted, and determine when they were last seen alive. Fortunately, they had taken many photos, and their camera was found intact among their belongings, which provided a useful starting point for tracking their movements. A guest book at a tourist cabin near the lookout point, where they had parked their car, contained entries expressing their delight with the weekend getaway. They had also visited a fishing pier about 20 miles away on Saturday, as evidenced by the photographs they took. Police officers returned to the pier and interviewed locals to find people who may have seen something significant. Several people remembered a young couple in a red car who inquired about overnight accommodations but found all 3 nearby hotels fully booked due to peak tourist season. They had dinner at a local restaurant, walked around the area, and took photos before leaving in the evening. According to those who saw and interacted with them, they was friendly, did not engage in any conflicts, and seemed carefree and happy. However, none of the witnesses could recall anything unusual or suspicious. The location where the bodies were found was a protected area, closed to camping. However, the young couple had nowhere else to stay overnight, so they decided to camp on the beach, using sleeping bags instead of a tent. They felt safe on the secluded beach on a warm August night and planned to return to the rock and water camp on Sunday. This information helped investigators narrow down the time frame of their deaths. Since they went to sleep but didn't survive until morning, it's likely they were killed between 11 p.m. on Saturday and dawn on Sunday. Despite the ongoing investigation and public appeals for information, police withheld certain details, including the results of the ballistics analysis. This action was taken to prevent the suspect from being tipped off and getting rid of the murder weapon before the investigation could start. The investigation first focused on a local homeless man who was known to sleep on the beach where the crime occurred. He was found and questioned by police, but despite not having an alibi for the night of the crime, he was not confirmed to be involved. The main reasons for this were that the murder weapon was never found and his DNA did not match the DNA found on a beer bottle discovered at the crime scene. The case went cold for nearly 2 years, but in the spring of 2006, police decided to release more information about the crime, including details about the weapon used. They also offered a $50,000 reward for any information that could help identify the perpetrator and solve the case. Following the public appeal, authorities received over 1,000 calls, but only a few were useful for the investigation. One individual, 26 years old Sean Gallen, drew particular attention from several locals who described him as an aggressive collector of firearms and blades. He was reportedly prone to conflicts, had a history of property damage, and frequently threatened violent behavior. The police investigated Chane Gallen and questioned him because they already knew him from previous incidents involving fights and drunk driving. Upon inspecting his possessions, Chane did possess numerous weapons but did not own the rifle in question. Authorities were unable to verify his whereabouts around the time of the crime due to the year gap, and his DNA did not match the sample found on the beer bottle at the crime scene, forcing his release. Meanwhile, international authorities were investigating another individual, 61-year-old Joseph Henry Burgess, who made locals nervous due to his tendency to carry firearms and exhibit aggressive behavior. Burgess was described as erratic, often claiming he received orders from God, sparking suspicion that he could be the perpetrator. Joseph Burgess was living in Canada in the late 1970s, feeling lost and without a clear sense of purpose or direction in his life. In 1978, he joined the Children of God commune, presenting himself as a deeply devoted individual. Those around him considered him excessively zealous. A rivalry with two young members escalated into hostility, and shortly after, both individuals were found dead with multiple close-range gunshot wounds to the head. The circumstances of their deaths were particularly notable. Their bodies were discovered in sleeping bags on a beach, suggesting they were shot while asleep. By the time the authorities arrived, Joseph had disappeared. Although evidence left behind implicated him in the crime, he had already fled to the United States, crossing the border illegally. Joseph managed to evade capture for nearly 25 years until the police linked him to a double homicide in California. However, the opportunity to question him was lost when a shootout occurred during his arrest, resulting in the deaths of both a police sergeant and Joseph, who initiated the gunfire. This ultimately unresolved case remains shrouded in mystery. A 35-year-old man named Chane van Heerden was killed by his younger brother, Chane Gallen. The brothers had gotten into an argument, during which Chane, who was under the influence of illicit substances, shot Chane 3 times with a gun. Chane had a history with the police, having been previously investigated for a double murder on a beach, but was released due to lack of evidence. Since then, Chane had been in trouble with the law twice for causing property damage and making threats, but only received fines. It was also discovered that Chane was an avid hunter and enjoyed making knives and other bladed weapons. People who knew him described him as antisocial, aggressive, and unpredictable. After killing his brother, Chane tried to run away but was caught almost immediately. The police decided to take another look at Chane's possible involvement in a crime that happened 13 years ago. They found useful information on his social media page, where he had posted pictures of his large collection of weapons and talked about his supposed psychic abilities. According to his posts, Chane believed he was on a special mission and was receiving instructions from outer space. Chane's behavior initially led police to suspect that he had serious mental health issues. He refused to cooperate with the investigation, spoke incoherently, and maintained his innocence. A new lead was found by investigators who examined private messages on the deceased brother's social media page, something no one anticipated. In 2006, a $50,000 reward had been offered for information about a double homicide case. Chane's former girlfriend had messaged his brother, suggesting that she could claim the reward by turning Chane in. It appeared that both the girlfriend and the brother had knowledge about the case, but they had chosen to remain silent. Unfortunately, it was no longer possible to question either of them, as the brother had been shot and the girlfriend had died in a car accident 2 years earlier. However, when Chane was shown the printouts of the messages between his former girlfriend and his brother, he made a shocking confession. Despite his initial denials, Chane began to provide a detailed account of the events surrounding the double homicide. His recollection of the details was vivid, even though more than 13 years had passed since the crime occurred. One evening, a man left his house with a Marlin rifle, planning to hunt in a nearby wooded area. However, After wandering aimlessly for a couple of hours, he decided to head down to a nearby beach, which he believed was a good spot to find wild boars. As he walked along the shore, he came across two sleeping bags with a young man and woman asleep inside. He stood there watching them for several minutes, when suddenly he heard voices in his head telling him to kill them. The man claimed that this was a mission from outer space that he had to carry out. So, he pointed his rifle directly at the young man's head and fired, instantly killing him. The sound of the shot woke she, but before she could even process what was happening, the man fired again, killing her as well. He then picked up the spent casings and put them in an empty beer can he had been carrying. Later, he threw the can into some bushes in his father's backyard, where he also hid the rifle, asking his father to keep it for him. Shane's father hid the murder weapon in the cellar of his old barn without asking any questions. Remarkably, Shane's account of the crime was later confirmed. When the barn eventually collapsed, the rifle was discovered at the site, and a beer can with shell casings was still hidden in the overgrown bushes in the backyard. The property's abandonment after Shane's father passed away in 2009 had helped preserve these key pieces of evidence. A beer bottle found on the beach was initially considered evidence, but it was later discovered to be unrelated to the crime. Shane claimed that voices in his head ordered him to commit violent acts and that he was not aware of his actions when he committed the crime. His defense argued that Shane was mentally ill and unfit to stand trial. The court relied on expert psychiatrists to assess the validity of these claims. The psychiatric evaluation found that Shane did indeed suffer from multiple mental health disorders, which were exacerbated by his use of alcohol and prohibited substances. However, the evaluation also showed that at the time of the crime, Shane acted with deliberation and careful planning, fully aware of his actions and the need to cover his tracks to avoid detection. Specifically, Shane deliberately killed the young man first, knowing that she would be less able to resist or defend herself if anything went wrong. Shane carefully removed the casings and handed the rifle to his father, instructing him to conceal it. Although psychiatrists diagnosed Shane with mental issues, they concluded he was mentally fit to stand trial and be held accountable for his actions. Notably, his family and former girlfriend were aware of or suspected his involvement in the double homicide, yet none of them reported him to the police. Shane's trial took place in the spring of 2019, nearly 15 years after the double homicide. On June 17, 2019, he was sentenced to 2 consecutive life terms without parole, plus an additional 94 years for killing his brother in 2017. He is currently serving his sentence in a special prison unit for inmates with mental disorders. Due to his continued claims of hearing voices and aggressive behavior, he is closely monitored to prevent harm to himself or others. The motive behind the double homicide was never established. According to reports, Shane randomly encountered they sleeping on the beach and decided to end their lives without apparent reason. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Kelsey Smith. Kelsey Smith was born on May 3, 1989, in Overland Park, Kansas. Kelsey was the third of 5 children in a close-knit family. Her parents, Gregory and Missy Smith, raised her alongside her siblings, Steve, Lindsay, Kat, and Zach. Gregory Smith, the family patriarch, was a retired U.S. Navy veteran and had served in the police force for over 20 years. He was enjoying his retirement after a long and dedicated career. Kelsey grew up in a loving family environment, close to all her siblings. Kelsey's mother, Missy Smith, has dedicated her life to health care, working at a local hospital for many years. Despite her busy career, she has managed to balance work and family life well, raising her children and creating a warm family environment. Kelsey has been an active, outgoing, and creative child since she was a child. She enjoyed singing, dancing, and playing musical instruments, which she learned in music school. She was also active in school theater and choir performances. Kelsey is also passionate about sports, especially gymnastics and soccer. She often attends sporting events with her father and brother, cheering on her local team. With a great sense of humor and many talents, Kelsey has left a deep impression on those around her. Her love for animals, which began in childhood, inspired her dream of becoming a veterinarian after college. During her senior year of high school, Kelsey found work at the local symphony orchestra, where she played the clarinet at various city events. Through this job, she set a goal of saving enough money within 6 months to buy her first car, a 1987 Buick Regal. Although her parents were concerned that the car was an older model, they offered to contribute to the cost so that Kelsey could buy a newer car from the family budget. However, Kelsey was determined to buy her first car herself, using only her own savings, so she turned down their offer. The Kelsey family prioritized providing their children with a well-rounded education, focusing on education and personal development. They also instilled in their children a strong sense of discipline. The family had clear rules that everyone followed without exception, including sharing their plans and notifying each other if they would be out late. Kelsey demonstrates her adherence to these rules by being punctual, sharing her whereabouts with her parents, and informing them of her social activities. During her senior year, Kelsey began a romantic relationship with John Smith. She describes it as deeply in love and like the relationships depicted in books or movies. They celebrated New Year's 2007 together and have been virtually inseparable ever since. John, who is 1 year older than her, appears to be a responsible and caring partner who treats Kelsey with respect. Both sets of parents approve of their relationship. In May 2007, Kelsey turned 18, graduated from high school, and was accepted into a prestigious university in Kansas to study veterinary medicine. This was one of the happiest times of her life. However, these happy days did not last long. Kelsey attended parties with her classmates to celebrate the end of high school and enjoyed spending time with John. At this point, Kelsey had achieved everything she wanted, got into her dream college, and was in a fulfilling relationship with a wonderful partner who was planning to propose. Her life was bright and happy. However, her disappearance from a shopping mall parking lot on June 2, 2007 changed everything. Kelsey and her boyfriend John were about to celebrate a big milestone, 6 months of dating. To make it special, John planned to propose with a custom-made engagement ring and had booked a romantic dinner for they of them. Unaware of John's plans, Kelsey also wanted to surprise him with a gift. That Saturday, she got ready, drove to a nearby Target Corporation store, and called her mother around 7 p.m. to say she had found the gift but needed a special bag for it. Her mother suggested checking the mall across the street from Target Corporation for a romantic gift bag. Kelsey thanked her mother for the advice and promised to be home soon. John was supposed to pick her up at 8 o'clock. However, after that conversation with her mother never heard from Kelsey again. Kelsey failed to return home. When John arrived at 8 with a large bouquet of flowers, he was shocked and frightened to discover Kelsey's absence. Her parents were equally terrified, as it was unlike Kelsey to ignore phone calls and texts. She had vanished in a busy area during the daytime, and no one had witnessed her disappearance. Kelsey's father and 2 eldest siblings began searching for her. They found her car parked at the Oak Park Mall, which gave them a glimmer of hope that she might still be inside the mall for some unknown reason. However, after thoroughly searching the mall, inquiring with salespeople and security guards, they concluded that Kelsey was not there. Upon returning to the car, they found it undisturbed with no signs of struggle or violence. Kelsey's father, a former police officer, decided not to touch anything to preserve potential evidence, as the car might be part of a crime scene. Kelsey's parents reported her missing to the police the same day, but the police were initially hesitant to start searching right away. They explained that since Kelsey was 18, she wouldn't be considered missing until 24 hours had passed. However, Kelsey's father, who had connections, insisted on an immediate search. He also asked hospitals in the city if a woman matching Kelsey's description had been admitted. That evening, the police interviewed Kelsey's family and John to confirm their whereabouts and rule them out as suspects, a standard procedure in missing person cases. The police also reviewed surveillance footage from the Target store, which showed Kelsey entering the store, browsing, making a purchase, and leaving while talking on the phone to her mother. She was asking her mother about a gift bag and then drove to the Oak Park Mall across the street, as her mother suggested. Kelsey parked her car near the side entrance of the mall, close to the wall. Her car was inspected by experts and appeared to be untouched from the outside. The gift for John was on the passenger seat, and her backpack with personal items, including a tablet and wallet with $300 in cash, was in the back. Since everything was still inside, robbery was quickly ruled out as a motive. It appears Kelsey only left with her credit cards and phone, as everything else was still in the car. There were no signs of struggle, blood, or damage, and the only unknown fingerprint was found on the driver's seatbelt, which did not belong to Kelsey, her family, or boyfriend. The investigation tried to track Kelsey's location through her mobile phone signal, but the device was inaccessible, possibly turned off or damaged. Despite this, it was possible to determine the last known location of the phone to narrow the search area. However, Verizon Communications, the wireless carrier, delayed providing the necessary data for several days. Instead of refusing to cooperate, the company kept promising to look into the matter, which effectively slowed down the process. In 2007, telecom companies were permitted to keep subscriber information from law enforcement, including police and FBI, without a court order. They based this on data protection laws. Not even situations where someone's life was in danger were exempt from this rule. A closer look at surveillance footage revealed a disturbing detail: a mysterious stranger was stalking Kelsey. The man initially did not attract attention because he kept a safe distance and did not interact directly with Kelsey. He was a Caucasian man between the ages of 20 and 25 with dark hair, short and a light beard, wearing a plain white t-shirt and black shorts. He followed Kelsey into the Target store about 30 seconds and continued to follow her from a distance as she browsed the various sections. The surveillance cameras captured his movements, and his behavior was later described by the prosecution as similar to a predator stalking its prey. After Kelsey left the store, the man followed her to the Oak Park parking lot in his Chevrolet truck, waiting until she was alone. It's possible that he overheard her conversation with her mother, as he was standing close by while she was on the phone. This may have allowed him to learn about her plans to visit the nearby shopping center. Unfortunately, Kelsey had parked her car in a poorly lit spot, next to a side door and a storage area, which made it difficult for the cameras to capture what happened next. As Kelsey sat in her car, the man parked his truck beside her and got out, wearing the same white t-shirt and black shorts. The stranger came up to her on the driver's side and, likely threatening to harm her, forced her to get behind the wheel of his Chevrolet. The truck then drove away in an unknown direction. Due to Gregory Smith's connections and experience, he believed that the more attention and coverage the case received, the higher the chances of finding their daughter and bringing the perpetrator to justice. As a result, the story was featured in both national and international media, including the popular show, America's Most Wanted. When surveillance footage showed the stranger following Kelsey, the clearest images of his face were broadcast on the news, urging viewers to come forward if they recognized him. The police received calls from people claiming to have seen the man in various cities and states, although most of these reports turned out to be incorrect. Each lead was investigated. On June 6th, a woman named Mrs. Miggs called the police, stating that she recognized her neighbor, Edwin Hall, from the footage. Initially, she had hesitated to report it due to doubts, but the information about the truck removed her last doubts, as Edwin owned an old 1970s Chevrolet. On June 6, 2007, two significant events occurred in the investigation. The police received crucial data from Verizon Communications about the last known location of Kelsey's phone signal. This information pinpointed a specific cell tower, allowing the police to establish a 1.1-mile search radius to the north. Within 45 minutes of starting the search, Kelsey's body was found in the brush near Longview Lake, Missouri, about 30 meters from where she was abducted. The medical examiners determined that she had been brutally assaulted and strangled with her own belt. Kelsey's body was discovered without clothing, except for the belt used to strangle her. Her body was carelessly discarded in the bushes, partially covered with dry branches. Over the 4 days it lay exposed to the June sun, her remains were severely disfigured by insects and wildlife, making them almost unrecognizable. Despite the state of her remains, the examination confirmed that the body was indeed Kelsey Smith. The second major event on June 6 was the arrest of the main suspect. When police arrived at his residence, he remained calm and acknowledged that his friends called him Jack. He agreed to provide a statement at the police station. During the interrogation, Edwin Hull claimed he had never seen Kelsey before, even when shown a photograph of her. When presented with surveillance footage from the store that showed him following her, he insisted that he had only visited Target for personal reasons and hadn't noticed her. He suggested that their appearance together in the footage was just a strange coincidence. Despite being shown irrefutable evidence, Edwin seemed confident that he had covered his tracks and couldn't be held accountable. He had thoroughly cleaned his van and had used protection during the assault, leaving no DNA evidence behind. However, Edwin agreed to cooperate with the investigation and provided his DNA sample and fingerprints. A crucial piece of evidence emerged when his fingerprints matched those found on Kelsey's car's seatbelt buckle. A thorough search of his home also revealed a hidden air pistol with Kelsey's DNA on the barrel. Edwin was officially charged with abduction, assault, and murder. A jurisdictional issue arose, as Kelsey was abducted in Kansas but her body was found dead in Missouri. This was important because it affected the potential sentence. In Missouri, Edwin faced the possibility of a capital punishment trial and sentence. Edwin realized the seriousness of his situation and, after consulting his lawyer, decided to confess to the crime and provide details in the hope of a reduced sentence. He described how he had noticed Kelsey entering the store and followed her, getting close enough to overhear her phone conversation about visiting the shopping center across the street. Edwin waited until Kelsey was alone, then followed her to the adjacent parking lot. He was pleased when she parked in a secluded spot near the side entrance. He got out of his vehicle, armed with a pistol, and waited for Kelsey to return to her car. As she was getting into the driver's seat, he prevented her from closing the door. Kelsey had already pulled out the seatbelt, and Edwin allowed her to buckle up, leaving his fingerprint on it. Edwin then put the pistol barrel in Kelsey's mouth, threatening her to move to his vehicle's driver's seat. Kelsey drove Edwin's truck while he aimed the gun at her and gave her directions. When they reached a remote area at the state border, Edwin ordered Kelsey out of the truck and led her into the bushes. There, he assaulted and strangled her with the belt, then covered her body with branches. He thoroughly cleaned his truck to eliminate any evidence of Kelsey's presence, including fingerprints and DNA. He then hid the pistol, which had Kelsey's saliva on it, in his home, believing it would never be discovered. When questioned about his motive, Edwin failed to provide a clear answer, instead making a comment about the victim's physical appearance. During the investigation, several other women and girls came forward, revealing a pattern of abuse and harassment by Edwin. Further investigation uncovered more instances of Edwin's wrongdoing, including coercing a 14-year-old neighbor into intimacy, harassing a waitress, and fleeing a restaurant without paying. These findings led to additional charges, including corruption of a minor, harassment, and theft. Edwin's lawyer attempted to garner sympathy from the court by highlighting his client's troubled childhood, past victimization, and unstable upbringing. Despite these efforts, the defense was unsuccessful. Edwin's lawyer was the only person to speak in his defense and show support. Notably, Edwin's wife attended all court hearings but chose not to defend her husband, instead sitting quietly in the background. On September 16, 2008, a Johnson County judge sentenced Edwin Hall to 27 life sentences without parole. After hearing the verdict, the defendant apologized to the Kelsey family for his actions and broke down in tears. He is now serving his sentence at the Hutchinson Correctional Facility in Kansas. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Banaz Mahmud. Banaz Mahmud was born on December 16, 1985 in Iraq. She comes from an Iraqi Kurdish family with strong religious traditions. Her parents, Mahmud Babakar Mahmud and his wife, had 6 children, 1 son, Bahman, and 5 daughters, Baza, Beel, Han, Jaban, and Banaz. They lived in a rural tribal area in Iraqi Kurdistan, adhering to traditional values, especially regarding women's roles. In 1995, when Banaz was 10 years old, her family moved to the UK. However, this change in location did not alter their deeply held religious and traditional views. Despite being in a more liberal European country, the family continued to reject modern opinion and lived within their tight-knit religious community. At 17, Banaz was forced into a marriage with a man 10 years her senior, who had recently arrived from Iraq. He did not speak English and lacked basic literacy skills. Banaz having met her future husband only 3 times before the wedding. Banaz, described as a girl with brown eyes, long dark hair, and a kind smile, followed tradition and moved into her new husband's home, despite him being a stranger to her. From the start, Banaz suffered physical and emotional abuse at the hands of her husband. Despite having lived in the UK and being aware of her rights, she was trapped in a cycle of violence. She tried to leave her husband multiple times, but her family forced her to return, as it was considered a disgrace for the entire Mahmud family. With no support from her relatives, Banaz turned to the police twice, but they failed to take action, leaving her vulnerable to further abuse. In July 2005, after 2 years of marriage, Banaz finally escaped her husband's house and returned to her parents' home. After leaving her husband, Banaz felt a sense of freedom. She met Ramith Soleimani, and they fell deeply in love. However, they had to keep their relationship a secret. They would only communicate twice a day, exchanging messages in the morning and evening. Ramith was unlike the men surrounding Banaz, as he was calm, wise, and courteous. He treated she with great respect and kindness, instantly winning her heart. Before long, they began envisioning a future together, discussing wedding plans and a happy family life. They even chose names for their potential children. These joyful dreams brought Banaz happiness and gave her the strength to cope with the hatred and aggression from her family. In early October 2005, Banaz was walking down the street when she noticed a car following her. She recognized the people inside as Kurdish migrants sent by her father. Knowing her family's history, Banaz became terrified for her safety. On October 10, 2005, Banaz visited the police station again. During a 2-hour conversation, she shared detailed information about her life with her husband, including the physical abuse she suffered, her family's resentment, and the recent surveillance. She told the police that her husband had repeatedly beaten her, and during one incident, he nearly knocked out her tooth because she dared to call him by his first name in public. Banaz had previously informed the police that she feared for her life, but her concerns were ignored. The police failed to investigate her claims, neglecting to interview her family and husband to verify the accuracy of the information. She was told to contact them again if she felt threatened. Banaz and her boyfriend, Ramith, secretly met for about 2 months without being detected. However, in early December 2005, they were spotted by members of her family near a London subway station. This information was immediately reported to her father. That evening, her male relatives gathered at the family home, where they discussed her actions and deemed them unacceptable. Her uncle, Ari Mahmoud, declared that Banaz should be killed to restore the family's honor. Banaz overheard this conversation. Following this, Banaz went to the police again and explained that she had been under surveillance for months. She also told them that her family intended to kill her. She provided a list of 5 family members who were involved in the plot, but the police did not take her seriously. A serious mistake was made, which led to Banaz's disappearance. To uncover her fate, investigators must untangle a complicated network of lies, violence, and disregard for the truth. 2 weeks later, Banaz's father deceives her into visiting a relative's house, promising to discuss her divorce. Upon arrival, he forces her to drink brandy and leaves her alone in a room with the TV on. As she turns around, she sees her father putting on rubber gloves and reaching for a rope. Realizing her life is in danger, Banaz rushes to the front door, but it's locked. To escape, she breaks a window, cutting her hands on the shards. Banaz manages to reach a nearby cafe, where she collapses. Paramedics arrive and take her to the hospital, where the police are called. When Banaz regains consciousness, she contacts Rameth and asks him to come. After being discharged from the hospital, Banaz moves in with Rameth Soleimani. They celebrate the start of 2006 together and are happy. However, by mid-January, the Mahmoud family begins to pressure Banaz to return home, supposedly to mend their relationship and discuss her marriage to Rameth. Banaz trusted her parents and agreed to return to her father's house, believing her mother would protect her if her father became violent. To be safe, Banaz went to the police station again and gave a full statement, including the names of people she thought might harm her. Despite her fears, she returned to her family home. On January 22, 2006, Rameth was attacked by 3 men in the street who tried to force him into a car. He managed to fight back and reported the incident to the police. 2 days later, Rameth and Banaz were due to give a statement at the police station, but Banaz failed to appear. Rameth attempted to reach Banaz Mahmoud, but lost contact with her after she vanished upon returning to her family's residence. Rameth, who had been in constant touch with Banaz, grew increasingly worried and filed a missing persons report with the police. After numerous appeals, the police finally took action. The disappearance of Banaz Mahmoud sparked an investigation led by the Homicide and Serious Crime Directorate, with Chief Inspector Caroline Good at the helm. Initially, it was suspected that Banaz was being held captive in a house within the community. To locate her, Inspector Good organized an extensive search linked to the Mahmoud family. Banaz's father, uncle, and ex-husband were brought in for questioning as suspects. The police also began searching for 3 other men listed by Banaz in December 2005, Omar Hussein, Muhammad Ali, and Mohammed Hama, all of whom were her cousins. However, when the police searched the neighborhood and tried to question her family members, and the family refused to cooperate with the investigation into her disappearance. Police found no photos of Banaz at her family's home, and her family's complete lack of concern shocked officers. Caroline Good then focused on 30 individuals, all of whom were arrested and questioned. During the investigation, over 20 vehicles and 300 cell phones were seized from those involved. Every person questioned attempted to hinder the investigation, providing conflicting accounts of Banaz's whereabouts. Some claimed to have seen her after she went missing, while others, including her mother, refused to cooperate with the police. Some even suggested she was in hiding. Realizing that no one would cooperate voluntarily, Caroline Good obtained permission to bug the cells of those arrested. At that point, Banaz's father, her uncle, and Mohammed Hama remained in police custody. 2 other men under investigation had managed to escape to Iraq. The detectives were horrified when they received the initial wiretap results. Not only did the 3 arrested men show no remorse, but they also took pleasure in recounting the details of Banaz's death. Their conversations revealed that on January 23rd, the Mahmoud family intentionally left their home, allowing Omar Hussein and Halma to enter. Once inside, they attacked Banaz, subjecting her to a 2-hour ordeal of beatings and violence. As the torture came to an end, Halma wrapped a cord around Banaz's neck and strangled her. When recalling the final moments of Banaz's life, Halma couldn't contain his laughter. However, it was Mohammed Hama's admission of being present when Rameth was threatened that became the turning point in the case. While Halma was being held in a cell awaiting trial, his phone conversations were secretly recorded. Caroline Good listened to these recordings with growing horror as the suspect proudly described the gruesome details of the murder. In the recordings, Halma provided a detailed account of what they did to Banaz. Despite being terrified and vomiting, Banaz remained silent. Halma then wrapped the rope around her neck 3 times, pulling it so tight that it dug into her skin. As he continued to speak with excitement, he placed his feet on her back and pulled and tugged on the rope. Banaz clung to life until her last breath. It took the perpetrators over 30 minutes to kill Banaz. The brutality of the crime was too much for Caroline Good and the detectives, and they couldn't hold back their tears. Banaz's cousin, Dana Amin, 30, was present in the house and helped the perpetrator put Banaz's body in a suitcase. Muhammad Ali then dragged the suitcase out of the house to a waiting car nearby. Halma revealed that a police car drove by, but the officers didn't notice the suitcase, which had hair and an elbow protruding from it. The very people meant to protect Banaz were involved in plotting her murder. They strangled her with a shoelace, stuffed her body into a suitcase, and took it outside of London. Snippets of conversation mentioned a derelict house with a garden in Birmingham. Caroline Good used the information gathered and matched it with the movement data from the arrested suspects' phones to identify the search area. Due to the vastness of the area, the search could have taken a long time. During a conversation with the suspects, one of them suddenly turned to the other and asked if they had put the freezer back where it originally was. This sparked an idea for Caroline Good, now knew what to look for. A police helicopter was deployed to scan the area and spotted a house with a backyard filled with trash, including a white oblong object resembling a freezer that stood out among the black garbage bags. Upon closer inspection of the suspicious house, the officers' suspicions were confirmed. The police officers began digging, but as the hole reached shoulder depth, they were on the verge of giving up, all except Caroline Good. She recalled the words of Mohammed Hama, who had boasted to relatives that he had buried the victim so deep that she would only be found with the help of an informant. Caroline Good convinced the team to extend the search for another day. On the evening of April 28, 2006, their persistence paid off, and the suitcase was finally found. Unfortunately, Banaz's remains were in extremely poor condition, making it necessary to rely on dental records and DNA samples for identification. Her body was discovered folded into a fetal position, hidden in a suitcase and buried beneath a freezer in the garden of a Birmingham house. On May 1, 2006, the suspects were formally charged with the crime. However, they displayed no remorse, convinced that their actions were justified. Mohammed Hama even claimed that the case would not go to trial, as he believed he was simply carrying out an act of retaliation. Meanwhile, Caroline Good faced renewed opposition from the Kurdish diaspora community. Following the discovery of Banaz's remains, numerous individuals came forward to provide alibis for the suspects, claiming that they were in public on the day of the alleged and therefore could not have committed the crime. Approximately 50 individuals were involved or connected to Banaz's death in various capacities. Reflecting on the events, Caroline Good recalled feeling intense anger, disgust, and contempt for the men involved. She noted that 50 men had participated in the murder of one woman, and they took pride in their actions, which they saw as a demonstration of their masculinity. In March 2007, the trial against Mahmoud Babakar Mahmoud, Ari Mahmoud, and Mohammed Hamad began at London Central Criminal Court. Prosecutor Victor Temple described the crime as a cold-blooded and heartless execution that was orchestrated by the victim's father and uncle. In June 2007, a jury delivered finding all three defendants guilty of the charges and ineligible for leniency. The sentences handed down were severe. The father received a life sentence with a minimum of 20 years, the uncle was given life with a 23-year minimum, and cousin Mohammed Hama also received a life sentence with a minimum term of 17 years. Judge Brian Barker was scathing in his delivery of the verdict, stating, "You decided that your so-called family honor needed to be restored, which meant she had to die and her memory erased. This is a heinous and heartless crime. What kind of honor is it when a father prioritizes his social status over the life of his own child?" A mere 4 months after the trio's conviction, London police were informed that Muhammad Ali had been arrested in Iraq for a crime committed against a young boy. Muhammad Ali had taken his own life. Omar Hussein, the last of the 5 perpetrators, had been hiding in rural Iraq, attempting to avoid public detection. However, in December 2009, he was shot in the leg during an altercation with one of his brothers and required medical attention. Upon arriving at the hospital, police were notified and subsequently arrested him. Initially, Omar Hussein denied being in London in 2005, thereby claiming innocence in Banaz's death. But UK Social Security records revealed that he had been receiving refugee benefits during that time, contradicting his statement. The court ultimately sentenced him to life imprisonment with a minimum term of 21 years. Dana Amin was given an 8 years prison sentence for his role in disposing of Banaz Mahmoud's body and hindering the investigation. A recorded interview with Banaz at a police station implicated her family in the crime. Banaz had previously handed in a letter to a police station in South London, naming individuals who threatened to kill her and her boyfriend Rameth. The individuals named in the letter were from Banaz's family and the wider Iraqi Kurdish community. They were angry about her decision to divorce her husband, who treated her poorly. Despite several attempts to leave him, Banaz returned due to family pressure. The police failed to respond properly to Banaz's situation, which ultimately resulted in her death. However, this case prompted significant changes in how honor-related cases are handled. An inquiry into police misconduct was launched after Banaz's death, and an independent commission investigated 9 police officers for their inadequate response to her allegations. 7 officers received reprimands, and 2 were dismissed. It is essential to recognize the tireless efforts of Caroline Good and her team, who successfully located Banaz's body, secured the conviction of her father and uncle, and brought the escaped perpetrators back from Iraq. Banaz was laid to rest at the Merton and Sutton Joint Cemetery in Morden. A memorial service was held in her honor on June 26, 2007, at the MN Auditorium, followed by the installation of a granite memorial headstone at her gravesite. The memorial was attended by a small group of people, including Rameth Soleimani, Caroline Good, and Banaz's 2 sisters. Notably, Banaz's family did not attend either service. Rameth Soleimani, who had been living in the UK under witness protection, was profoundly affected by Banaz's death. He penned a heartfelt letter expressing his love and grief, describing Banaz as the love of his life and his entire world. Unfortunately, his pain and suffering continued, and in May 2016, 10 years after the tragedy, he took his own life. This was his 3rd attempt to end his life, a devastating consequence of the trauma he had endured. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Sarah Stern. Sarah Elizabeth Sarah was born on March 24, 1997, in Neptune City, New Jersey, to Michael and Susan Sarah. As their only child, Sarah received all the love and attention from her parents, who had been unable to have more children due to health issues. Sarah grew up to be a lively, cheerful, and outgoing child. She was involved in various activities, including school theater, photography, drawing, swimming, and softball. Her passion was art, and she aspired to become an artist or designer. After graduating from high school, Sarah enrolled in a local college to pursue her dream. Tragedy struck in the autumn of 2013 when Sarah's mother, Susan, passed away after a long battle with cancer. Despite periods of remission, the disease ultimately took its toll. This devastating loss was a tremendous shock to the family, particularly for Sarah, who was extremely close to her mother. After a period of struggling with depression, Sarah began to support her ailing father and care for their beloved dog, Buddy. As time passed, her life started to improve, and she set goals for the future. Upon graduating from college, Sarah planned to apply to a prestigious university in New York. Before pursuing further education, she hoped to travel the world, with a particular interest in visiting Canada and possibly even living there for a while. Her father, Michael Sarah, frequently traveled out of state for work, often for weeks at a time. However, he never worried about leaving Sarah alone, as she was a grown and independent young woman, and their town was considered safe. But on the night of December 3, 2016, around 2:30 a.m., an unsettling incident occurred. A concerned citizen reported an abandoned vehicle on the Belmar Bridge along Highway 35, prompting the police to become involved. The area was usually deserted at night, which made the lone, empty vehicle stand out. A taxi driver, who was taking a shortcut home across the old bridge on the outskirts, noticed the car parked on the side of the road. He stopped to see if anyone needed assistance, but found the vehicle empty with no one around. Concerned that the driver might have jumped into the water below, a tragic occurrence that had happened before in this spot, the taxi driver called the police. Police officers responding to the scene found the car's keys in the ignition and no signs of blood or struggle, leading them to initially believe that the owner may have intentionally left the car on the bridge to jump into the river. To investigate further, they checked the car's ownership and discovered it belonged to 85-year-old Lily Sarah, who lived in a nearby town. When officers visited Lily's home, they found her alive and well. She explained that she hadn't driven the car in years due to poor eyesight, and her 19-year-old granddaughter, Sarah, was the frequent driver. Lily tried to contact Sarah but was unable to reach her because her phone was turned off. She then provided the officers with her son's address, where Sarah lived, and informed them that Sarah was likely alone, as her father was out of town for work and wouldn't return until the following week. Sarah was nowhere to be found at her home. Although the back door was open, an initial search of the house didn't turn up any signs of foul play. However, they did find the family dog locked in one of the bedrooms, whining. Despite the open back door, there were no signs of disarray or struggle, and no evidence of an intruder. As the news of her disappearance spread, Sarah's father, Michael, rushed back home on the next available flight. Upon his arrival, he confirmed that everything was still in its place and nothing was missing. Notably, all of Sarah's personal belongings, including her passport, driver's license, and mobile phone, were still at the house. The police shared their initial concerns with Michael, suggesting that Sarah might have gone to the nearby bridge with intentions to harm herself. They asked if he had noticed any warning signs of suicidal tendencies or self-harm. Michael revealed that Sarah had struggled with depression after her mother's passing, but had made a full recovery with the help of loved ones and her studies. In fact, Sarah had big plans for her future, aspiring to become a designer and travel the world. To piece together what happened, the police needed to know who Sarah had contact with on the day she vanished, what conversations she had, and who saw her last. The first witnesses to come forward revealed that Sarah had spent most of December 2nd with her childhood friend, Liam McAtasney. As the last person to see her, Liam was a crucial part of the investigation. The police quickly decided to speak with him to gather more information and reconstruct the events of that day. When the police arrived at the McAtasney residence, they met with Liam's mother, who told them that her son was sleeping after a night shift. The officers asked her to wake Liam, who seemed confused about the situation. Once he was informed about Sarah's disappearance, Liam confirmed that they had spent the previous day together and agreed to go to the police station to give a statement. Liam shared that he and Sarah had attended college classes together that morning, but they decided to skip the last 2 lectures and go to her place to unwind instead. At her house, they played video games, chatted about their plans, and socialized. They briefly left her house twice to pick up food and visit a local supermarket. Liam left Sarah's house around 7 p.m. to go to his night shift job and did not see her again. Liam was also asked if Sarah had been struggling with any mental health issues. He explained that she had been battling deep depression since her mother passed away. He shared that Sarah often felt hopeless, wanting to escape or end her life, but he did not think that this meant she was planning to harm herself. He noted that she also struggled to connect with her father, leading to additional emotional strain. Liam considered it possible that Sarah's emotional state may have contributed to her disappearance. However, it was also clear that Sarah was planning a trip to Canada around that time and had recently exchanged money in preparation for her travels. Liam's testimony gained credibility when Canadian dollars were found in her bedside table drawer, though the amount was relatively insignificant. Preston Taylor, a close friend from high school, corroborated Liam's story. Preston mentioned that Sarah had struggled with depression, leading him to wonder if she had fled to Canada or taken her own life by jumping off a bridge. His emotional testimony underscored the strong bond he shared with Sarah. Despite these accounts, investigators soon ruled out the possibility of Sarah fleeing the country due to the absence of her passport. As a result, the search focused on the more distressing possibility of her having jumped to her death. A comprehensive search operation was launched along the river, involving divers, specialized equipment, and hundreds of volunteers, including police. However, strong currents posed a challenge, potentially carrying her remains or personal belongings far from the bridge, and thorough searches of both riverbanks were necessary to try to find any signs of Sarah. Among the volunteers searching for Sarah were her friends Liam and Preston. Despite their efforts, the search yielded nothing, prompting law enforcement to re-question those closest to Sarah. It was during this process that discrepancies in their accounts began to emerge. Sarah's friends and classmates described her as a happy and carefree person, with no signs of depression or problems with her father, whom she often spoke about affectionately. However, Liam and Preston's behavior after Sarah's disappearance raised eyebrows. They initially acted as if they had lost a loved one, gaining sympathy from many. But over time, their behavior seemed increasingly insincere, as if they were performing for an audience. The fact that Liam and Preston had only recently become close, about a month before Sarah's disappearance, raised suspicions and led the police to re-question them. Liam was visibly shaken when he was brought in for further questioning. The investigator asked him about his relationship with Sarah and Preston, and Liam explained that the 3 of them had grown up together on the same street and attended the same school. They were extremely close, sharing their deepest secrets and dreams with each other. Preston had even taken Sarah to prom, but they had never been romantically involved. Liam clarified that his relationship with Sarah was more than just friendship, he considered her like a sister. They had even listed each other as siblings on social media. Sarah had confided in Liam about her family, telling him that her mother had left her a significant amount of money in a safety deposit box at the bank. Sarah didn't trust her father, who claimed a right to the money, so she planned to retrieve it soon and move to Canada. However, when the investigator shared this information with Michael, Sarah's father, he provided a conflicting account. According to Michael, his wife had been saving money for Sarah's future since her birth, setting aside funds for education, a wedding, or a down payment on a house. The money had been stored at home in a shoebox, containing old and worn-out bills, but no one had thought much of it at the time. After Sarah's mother passed away, her father gave her a large sum of money, which he advised her to put in the bank. Sarah took his advice, dividing the money between her checking account for everyday expenses and a safe deposit box for the rest. She intended to use the money for graduate school and travel. Michael claimed he wasn't interested in the money for himself. When investigators discovered that Sarah had access to a significant amount of money, they began to suspect that her disappearance might be related to her finances. They decided to look into her financial transactions, including her bank account and safe deposit box. Their investigation revealed that Sarah had withdrawn a large amount of cash from an ATM just a few days before she disappeared, and had also accessed her safe deposit box at the bank around the same time. The detectives were in for another surprise when they reviewed the bank surveillance footage, which showed that Sarah was not alone when she visited the bank on December 1st. Liam was with her, raising questions about why he hadn't mentioned this earlier. When asked about it, Liam explained that Sarah had confided in him about her banking activities and had asked for his accompaniment because she was nervous about carrying a large sum of cash. Liam's hesitation was evident, but his story seemed plausible, and his demeanor appeared genuine. Further investigation led to the discovery of a security camera in a neighboring house that had captured footage of the street and Sarah's yard. The footage confirmed that Liam had stayed at Sarah's house until 7 p.m., then left for work and didn't return. Meanwhile, the silver sedan was seen leaving the garage around 11 p.m. This new information added a chilling twist to the already disturbing case. In a surprising turn of events, an acquaintance of Sarah's named Anthony walked into the police station about a month after her disappearance. Unaware of the recent events, Anthony had been out of town for several weeks. He shared a peculiar story that sent shockwaves through the investigation. It turned out that Anthony had gone to school with Sarah, Liam, and Preston, and after graduation, he had pursued a passion for filmmaking, keeping in touch only with Liam, who also shared his interest in cinema. Anthony remembered that about a month and a half before Sarah disappeared, Liam visited him and they spent an evening brainstorming ideas for a horror movie aimed at teenagers. Liam came up with a plot about a girl who shares a secret about a large sum of money with her friend, who then gains her trust and kills her, dumping her body in a river. Anthony thought the idea was good, and they even wrote a few pages of the script. After that, Anthony moved on to another project and forgot about the story. He then left town to work on a film as a camera assistant. When he returned, Liam unexpectedly called him and asked if the police had contacted Anthony. Anthony was surprised and had not heard that Sarah was missing, so he decided to go to the police. After hearing a new witness's testimony, the police asked Anthony to try to get Liam to confess by drawing him into a conversation. Anthony agreed and a plan was set in motion. He would invite Liam to work on a project that required renting expensive camera equipment, which they would pretend they couldn't afford. Liam had ambitions of being in a movie, so the police thought he would likely jump at the chance to make his dream a reality, especially if it meant using the money he had taken from Sarah. They decided to test him by setting up a sting operation. Anthony, a friend of Liam's, was asked to pretend to have connections in the film industry and offer him a deal. Anthony met with Liam and suggested they discuss the details in person. Unbeknownst to Liam, a hidden camera had been installed in Anthony's car to capture any incriminating evidence. When Liam got into the car, he looked around nervously, as if he suspected something was off. He then handed Anthony an envelope containing $2,000 in cash and asked if it was enough to rent the equipment they would need for the movie. Anthony agreed, and then asked Liam where he had gotten the old bills. Liam hesitated before admitting that the money belonged to Sarah, and that he and his friend Preston had taken it from her house because, In his words, "The dead don't need it." Although Liam didn't provide any further details, his admission was enough for the police to arrest him and his friend Preston on suspicion of a crime. Preston, Liam's accomplice, quickly began cooperating with the authorities and struck a deal with the prosecution. He told them that he hadn't directly participated in the crime, but had helped Liam cover his tracks and get rid of Sarah's body. According to Preston, Liam started plotting to take Sarah's money as soon as he found out about it. Sarah had kept her inheritance a secret, even from her closest friend, for a long time. However, when she began making serious plans for a trip to Canada, Liam asked her how she intended to pay for it, and she revealed that she had inherited a sum of money from her mother. Liam then persuaded her that it would be safer to store the money in a home safe rather than a bank vault, and he urged her to withdraw the cash. Liam, determined to carry out his plan, waited for the perfect opportunity while Sarah's father was away on a business trip. He enlisted the help of his friend Preston, promising him $25,000 in exchange for his assistance. Liam had Sarah withdraw a large sum of money from the ATM, but didn't check the exact amount. They spent the next day together, waiting for the right moment to strike. When the time came, Liam separated Sarah from her dog by locking it in another room, then approached Sarah from behind and attempted to strangle her. However, the crime proved more difficult than Liam anticipated. Sarah, being physically strong and athletic, resisted fiercely, resulting in an intense struggle until she eventually lost consciousness. But despite his best efforts, Liam was unable to determine whether she had truly succumbed. Sarah continued to show signs of life, leaving Liam to prolong his efforts to ensure her demise. This took nearly 30 minutes. Only when Liam was certain Sarah was dead did he leave her house, going about his normal routine by heading to work. He then had Preston follow up on his original instructions, no doubt aiming to ensure their sinister act would go unnoticed. Liam McAtasney snuck into Sarah's house through the back door, avoiding the camera's view, and dragged the body to the garage. He then cleaned up the room to remove any evidence. A couple of hours later, he returned to the house, took a small safe from Sarah's room, and placed the body in the car. Liam drove away carefully to avoid being caught on the neighbor's camera. He met Preston at a bridge, where they transferred the body to Preston's car and then disposed of it in a nearby river. After disposing of the body, they cleaned the car and drove back to Liam's house to divide the stolen money. However, they were disappointed to find only $110,000 in the safe. They decided to be cautious and not spend the old bills immediately to avoid raising suspicion. Preston buried the safe in a local park, and they only spent the money Sarah had withdrawn from her account. During the trial, Preston confessed to the crime, but Liam denied any involvement and tried to shift the blame to his friend. Liam's lawyer also claimed his client was innocent, suggesting that Preston acted alone. The case was complicated by the fact that Sarah's body was never found. When police searched Liam's house, they found a small key that fit the buried safe, which was identified by Preston as evidence of Liam's guilt. The trial of Liam McAtasney lasted over 2 years. Despite the fact that Sarah Stern's body was never found, the evidence presented in court proved McAtasney's guilt. This evidence included a script he had written months before the crime, a key to a safe found in his home, incriminating statements he made in the car, and old bills he had given to someone. Furthermore, fingerprints belonging to Liam and his accomplice, Preston Taylor, were found inside the safe. A co-worker of Liam's also testified that he had been absent from work for a few hours on the night of the crime and had asked someone to cover for him. As a result of the trial, Liam was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Preston, who had not directly participated in the crime, received an 18-year sentence for obstructing justice and hindering the investigation. Preston will be eligible for parole in 15 years. Unfortunately, Sarah Stern's body has still not been found. Hello friends, welcome to our channel, Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Jesse Bardwell. Jesse Bardwell was born on September 10, 1988, in Pascagoula, Mississippi, to loving parents Gary and Carla Bardwell. She had an older brother named Brandon. The siblings had a close relationship, with Brandon often protecting Jesse from bullies. Their childhood was filled with joy and love, thanks in part to frequent visits from their grandma Kitty, who adored her grandchildren. She would read to them, share stories, and invent games, creating a warm and nurturing environment. The Bardwell family embodied the quintessential American family spirit. Jessie was a kind, cheerful, and stylish girl who dreamed of a career in the beauty industry and one day opening her own salon. However, when Jessie was 14, her parents divorced, disrupting the family's harmony. She chose to live with her father, Gary, with whom she had a warm and trusting relationship. As a firefighter, Gary's job could be unpredictable, and Jessie would often call to check on him. Gary eventually married again, this time to Gina. Jessie developed a good relationship with her new stepmother. Gina proved to be an excellent homemaker, providing care and support to the entire family. Jessie was relieved to see her father happy with his partner, which made her feel secure about leaving home in the future. After completing her education, Jessie moved to Orange Beach, Alabama, to start her independent life. She worked as a waitress at Cobalt, a popular beachfront restaurant, to support herself. Her father, Gary, recalled how Jessie loved being near the water as it brought her peace. Despite the distance, they remained close, frequently exchanging messages and spending quality time together, such as going boating and fishing, whenever he visited. Kimberly Embry, the restaurant manager and Jessie's friend, discovered that Jessie's father was a skilled musician. After retiring, he dedicated more time to his craft, leading to frequent performances at the restaurant, where he even had his own table. Kimberly admired the close bond between Jessie and her father, describing them as true friends. Jessie always attended her father's performances, and the tips she earned helped fund her college education and pursue her dreams. At work, Jessie met a young man named Terry Ellis, who was also a waiter. They began dating and developed a steady and serious relationship, appearing to be a harmonious couple. However, at a social event, Jessie met Jason Lowe, a friend of Terry's, and was immediately smitten. Her sudden infatuation surprised everyone, and she fell deeply in love with Jason, becoming oblivious to her surroundings. Jessie and Terry parted ways amicably. Jessie opened up to him about her newfound feelings. This decision turned her life upside down, but she was drawn to Jason's charming and promising nature. He was handsome, held 2 degrees, and had a decent job. Jason was polite and knew how to present himself well. For Jessie, her new feelings marked the beginning of a new life. When Jason learned about her dreams, he promised to fulfill them. As he needed to relocate to Dallas, Texas, for a high-paying job in the technology industry, Jessie decided to follow him. Jessie viewed the move as an adventure, rather than a life-changing decision. Although she was hesitant to leave her father, Gary, for an extended period, her ambition and youthful idealism ultimately prevailed. She kept her plans a secret from her father, fearing his disappointment and knowing he would be opposed to her decision. As a result, she didn't inform him of her plans, even when they spent their last Christmas together. Mr. Bardwell didn't notice anything out of the ordinary about his daughter Jessie's behavior initially. She seemed happy, laughing and joking as usual. Jessie, 24, had moved to Richardson, a suburb of Dallas, with her boyfriend Jason. While Jason worked from home, Jessie was looking for a new job and scouting locations for her own salon. They had plans to get married and buy a house. However, Jessie's relationship with her father began to change drastically. They grew apart, and Jessie stopped answering her father's calls, which troubled Mr. Bardwell. It wasn't until speaking with Kimberly that Mr. Bardwell learned of Jessie's new boyfriend and her move out of state. He tried to reconnect with Jessie, but Jason controlled her communications. Mr. Bardwell's suspicions about Jason grew after meeting him when they visited Pascagoula. The father attempted to dissuade his daughter, Jessie, from returning to Texas, but she was resolute. When Gary inquired about her well-being, Jessie hugged him tightly, insisting everything was fine and expressing her desire to make her family proud. However, her father couldn't shake off the feeling that something was amiss. He even wrote a song, "Taken," in her honor. For months after Jessie moved to Texas, she ceased responding to phone calls. The final warning sign came on May 8th, when she failed to wish her mother and stepmother a happy Mother's Day, a cherished family tradition. Gary sensed something was terribly wrong and contacted Jason, Jessie's boyfriend. Jason claimed ignorance of Jessie's whereabouts, citing their supposedly open relationship, which allowed her to come and go as she pleased. However, Gary knew this was a lie, aware that Jason was a jealous and controlling partner who contradicted himself. The next morning, Jessie's father headed to Texas, convinced that her boyfriend was involved in her disappearance. During his journey, he sent the boyfriend a message warning him that if Jessie wasn't home when he arrived, there would be serious consequences. When he arrived at their apartment, he found no sign of Jessie or her belongings. Despite this, the boyfriend claimed he had no idea where she was and was waiting for her to return. Later, Kimberly shared some information that Jessie had confided in her during a rare heart-to-heart conversation. It turned out that Jason had been spending money on banned substances and entertainment, and his promises to fulfill Jessie's dreams had largely evaporated. The boyfriend had been pretending to be someone he wasn't, and this was also reflected in how he treated Jessie. While their relationship appeared fine in public, Jason was often rude and aggressive in private, leading to frequent conflicts. With Jessie missing, her father filed a missing person report with the Richardson police. The investigation was led by Detective Hiram Hale, a father of 3 daughters who was determined to uncover the truth. The police took immediate action, speaking with the boyfriend several times and searching the house, but they found no sign of Jessie. During the conversation, the young man, Jason, mentioned that he last saw Jessie on May 8 around 10 a.m. She left without explanation, and he thought she might be visiting her parents. He claimed that she drove away in her Acura car. Jason maintained that their relationship was casual and that he didn't control her or pry into her personal life. However, investigators discovered information that contradicted his statements. They found out that Jessie had sold her Acura car 3 weeks earlier, and Jason was present at the sale. This new information raised suspicions, and investigators questioned Jason again on May 12. When searching his home, police found a plate with a powder substance in the kitchen, which turned out to be cocaine. The investigation then shifted to Jason's garage and the vehicle inside. At first, Jason was unwilling to permit the search, stating that he shared the garage with others and therefore required their consent. However, he eventually dropped his objections. Upon entering the garage, officers noticed a mud-splattered Audi with a detached bumper. They suspected that Jessie's body might be inside the car. Although the vehicle was empty, the smell of decomposition was stronger inside. Police found the broken bumper and what appeared to be blood stains in the trunk. When experts applied a luminol-based substance to the cargo area, it illuminated with a blue light, indicating the presence of blood, likely belonging to the missing woman. Jason claimed he became stuck in the mud while searching for his girlfriend after the car's bumper caught on a bush. Despite this, he maintained that he had no knowledge of her whereabouts. However, he was unable to explain the presence of blood in the car or the controlled substances found in his home. Experts determined that the amount of blood in the trunk suggested that she was likely deceased. As a result, the case was reclassified as a homicide investigation. To prevent the main suspect from fleeing, Jason was detained on charges related to the narcotics found in his home. During interrogation, Jason continued to stick to his story. When shown a photo of his loved one, he refused to provide any explanations, gazing at the picture without emotion and suggesting that he was being framed for a crime he did not commit. Eventually, the suspect was charged with homicide, even though Jessie's body had not been found. The search for her continued, but it was a difficult and time-consuming process in the vast state of Texas, with its many rivers, lakes, fields, and forests, where a body could easily be hidden. 1 year later, Jason was in a Texas jail, still cooperating with the investigation. He revealed 2 key details about the case. Firstly, he claimed Jessie's death was an accident and planned to reveal more in court, hoping the jury would be understanding. This makes it difficult for prosecutors to build a case. Andy Farkas, Jason's defense attorney, is very happy about this. Farkas conducted a mock trial with a panel of outsiders acting as jurors, using the available evidence and Jason's confession. However, the mock trial ended in a not guilty verdict, with 15 out of the mock jurors voting to acquit. Farkas hoped that a real court would also deliver a not guilty verdict if they knew the truth. It was later revealed that Jason himself had provided the anonymous tip about the location of the victim's body, which became another piece of evidence in the investigation. The prosecution proposed a deal to reduce the sentence by half if Jason revealed Jessie's location. After discussing it with his lawyer, Jason agreed, on the condition that the source of the information would remain secret until the trial. The authorities wanted to find Jessie's body so her family could give her a proper burial and say their goodbyes. As time passed, Jessie's father, Gary, became consumed by grief and anger, longing for justice to be served. On May 19th, when Jessie's body was finally discovered, her loved ones were able to mourn her and say goodbye. However, when Gary received the autopsy report, he was shocked and appalled by the state of his daughter's body. She had been wrapped in a sheet and was barely recognizable as a human being, having been discarded like trash. Gary arranged for his daughter's body to be returned to her hometown with the help of his friends and former colleagues, who hired a funeral hearse to transport her. Jessie's family, friends, and acquaintances held a memorial service for her on the beach, where they prayed for her to be found and for justice for her suffering. About 1,000 people attended a memorial service at the First United Methodist Church to honor the victim. The victim's grandmother, Kitty Bardwell, spoke emotionally, saying that if the town could be cleansed by the tears shed for her granddaughter, it would be truly clean. The tragedy drew widespread attention, with many offering condolences to the family and coming forward to support them. Gary found a unique way to cope with his emotions. Gary printed a photo of Jason, attached it to a stump, and hit it with a 12-pound sledgehammer. This unusual form of therapy brought him some small sense of relief. However, Gary continued to struggle, often finding it hard to get out of bed in the morning. He held on to the hope that Jason would be tried and convicted for murdering his daughter. Gary blamed himself for not doing more to protect Jessie, wishing he had convinced her to leave Jason or at least break up with him. Gary remembered a phone call from Jessie, where she admitted he was right about Jason after they had argued and he had kicked her out. She had found temporary shelter with a friend but returned to Jason the next day, giving him another chance. Gary had no choice but to accept his daughter's decision, a choice that would later fill him with regret. When the trial finally began, Gary traveled to Texas, determined to see Jason punished for his crime. Prosecutor Cynthia Walker started her opening statement by describing Jason's personality. Many people saw him as complex and difficult to get along with, and he had few friends because of his long history of substance abuse, which often led to uncontrollable outbursts of anger. It's possible that Jessie was a victim of one of these outbursts. Prosecutor Westwin called some of Jason's former girlfriends to testify. They supported the prosecution's claims about Jason's aggressive behavior, saying they had feared for their lives because of his violent jealousy. Like Jessie, they had been isolated from their friends and family by Jason, who showed clear signs of being manipulative and a pathological liar. In contrast, Jason presented himself as superior to other men, successfully deceiving people. Jason responded quickly to these revelations in court. He said he had started using substances at age 13, influenced by his friends, and had become addicted. Jason Lowe tried to keep his life on track, earning multiple degrees and working for a prestigious global company. He claimed his actions were motivated by a desire to fulfill Jesse's dreams and build a life together out of love. However, the prosecution presented a different image of Jason. They suggested that his behavior was inconsistent with someone grieving the loss of a loved one. The investigation found that Jesse's death occurred between May 1st and May 3rd, likely on the day of a reported argument with Jason that the neighbors, the Jordans, witnessed. After Jesse's death, Jason moved her body to the garage and placed it in the trunk of his car, where it remained for several days. The blood found in the car was confirmed to be Jesse's. Jason later moved her body to a remote farm, hiding it in the nearby woods. The sheet wrapping Jesse's body was identified as part of Jason's bedding set, which was still in use at his home even after her death. Meanwhile, Jason continued to see other women, exchanging messages and intimate photos with them before meeting at his apartment. Jason tried to cope with his emotions by using substances, which he believed made dealing with reality easier. However, his attempt to distract himself was disrupted when detectives discovered his involvement in Jesse's death through a clever tactic. They asked Tommy Jordan, someone Jason knew, to talk to him while being monitored. During this conversation, Jason admitted to making a mistake and feeling guilty about an accident that happened with Jesse, which he attributed to his own negligence. Jason's admission was seen as a confession, and he eventually told the prosecution where Jesse's body was located. At the trial, Jason shared his account of what happened on the night of Jesse's death. He explained that they had taken pills that increased their libido and were intimate in the shower. Jason slipped and fell, followed by Jesse, who hit her head on the bathtub. She then sat down, feeling hot and dizzy, and Jason claimed he offered to call for medical help, but Jesse refused, thinking that rest and sleep would be enough. Jason found Jesse unresponsive and not breathing on his chest the next morning. Despite trying to revive her, she was dead. Afraid of being accused of murder, Jason didn't call the police and instead decided to handle the situation himself. He initially left Jesse's body in his car, but later moved it to a remote farm where he carelessly discarded her in a trash pile without a proper burial. However, Jason's story was questionable due to his questionable character and the results of the forensic medical examination. The examination revealed that Jesse had suffered severe head injuries that couldn't have been caused by slaps to the face, suggesting that Jason had tried to cover up evidence of a violent beating. As a result, Jason's entire story was discredited. After deliberating for 6 hours, the jury found him guilty. Judge Scott Becker sentenced Jason to 50 years in prison. Jason's original sentence could have been up to 99 years, but it was reduced due to a deal with the prosecution. As a result, Jason won't be eligible for parole until at least 2041. Gary felt a sense of relief when the verdict was announced, feeling that justice had been served. However, he noticed that Jason showed no remorse for his actions. Interestingly, Jason's ex-girlfriends, including Chrissy Chambers, were present at the trial, with Chambers commenting that if she could give one piece of advice to others in similar situations, it would be to get away as soon as possible. Jason continues to claim that the death was an accident and maintains his innocence to this day. Sadly, Jason's girlfriend, Jessie, had already paid the ultimate price. Jessie grew up with a positive example of male behavior, courtesy of her father Gary, but tragically discovered Jason's darker side too late. This experience serves as a warning that some men can be deceiving, manipulative, hiding behind a charming exterior. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Lindsay Birbeck. Lindsay was born in Blackburn, Lancashire, northwest England. She and her husband, Tim Birbeck, separated in July 2018, but they continued living together until March 2019. At that time, Lindsay moved to a new home on Burnley Road in Hanko. As a mother, Lindsay cared for her two adult children, Divin, 20, and Sarah, 17. Professionally, she worked as a teacher's aide at Atton Hill Elementary School in Burnley. She enjoyed being around children and was known for her artistic talent. Lindsay would often go the extra mile to create impressive props for school productions. On August 12, Lindsay went for a walk in the wooded area of Coppice, near her Hanko home. However, when her daughter Sarah and Sarah's boyfriend Brandon arrived at the house for a scheduled tea party, Lindsay was nowhere to be found. This was unusual, as Lindsay was not one to forget appointments. Sarah tried calling Lindsay multiple times, but there was no answer. She sent Lindsay a text message saying, "Where are you?" We sat outside for an hour and called 6 times. When Lindsay didn't respond, Sarah sent another message with a series of question marks, but still received no reply. After waiting for an hour outside Lindsay's house, Sarah called her father, Tim Birbeck, since her mother was not home and not answering her phone. Tim took Sarah and her brother Brandon to his house around midnight. Later, Sarah and Tim went back to Lindsay's house with a spare set of keys, but Lindsay was nowhere to be found. The house looked undisturbed, and there were no signs of anything out of the ordinary or a note explaining Lindsay's whereabouts. At 12:11 a.m. on August 13th, Tim contacted the police to report Lindsay missing, stating, "Lindsay seems to be missing. We can't find her." Lindsay's disappearance shocked the community, prompting a massive search effort. Hundreds of people, including families with strollers and teenagers, joined the search, even if they didn't know Lindsay personally. After days of searching, posting on social media, and putting up posters, the community gathered at a local spot called Coppice for 2 days, hoping to find a clue to help solve the mystery of Lindsay's disappearance. The search continued non-stop despite the challenges. Thousands of posters with Lindsay's picture were distributed throughout the neighborhood. A Facebook group to aid the search gained 10,000 members. Posters soon appeared everywhere, including lamp posts, storefronts, and traffic lights, asking for help in finding Lindsay. Police launched a thorough investigation into Lindsay's disappearance, conducting extensive searches around her house and the surrounding countryside. A team of specialists, including police officers, dog handlers, firefighters, and mountain rescue volunteers, scoured the area. They also deployed drones and helicopters to cover a wide range, including popular walking and running routes. For days after Lindsay went missing, police released CCTV footage showing her last seen walking along Burnley Road towards Coppice at 4:10 p.m. She was wearing a distinctive purple jacket, black leggings, and dark sneakers with white soles. As a week passed since her disappearance, hopes of finding Lindsay alive began to dwindle. Despite the efforts of the police, her whereabouts remained a mystery. However, the police emphasized that there was no evidence to suggest she was the victim of a crime, leaving a glimmer of hope that she might still be found alive. That evening, hundreds of local residents joined forces for the first mass public search of Coppice, following a rallying call on social media. A local resident's dog ran into the woods at Errington Cemetery, prompting its owner to follow. The dog didn't respond to its owner's calls, instead hiding its head in the bushes and sniffing at something. As the owner approached, they felt something soft underfoot, which frightened them. A terrible smell and swarming flies surrounded a plastic bag, with what appeared to be a foot visible. On August 24th, Lindsay Birbeck's body was discovered 12 days after her disappearance. Her naked body was buried in the cemetery, wrapped in 2 clear plastic bags and mixed with earth and grass, in a shallow grave. With this discovery, the search for Lindsay Bobek was concluded, and a murder investigation officially began. Pathologist Dr. Naomi Carter conducted an autopsy and found that the cause of death was a broken neck, likely caused by a forceful blow from a foot or knee. The trauma was so severe that the entire larynx was crushed. Additionally, it appeared that someone had attempted to cut off the right leg after death, possibly using a saw, leaving a large laceration that cut down to the bone. Due to the poor condition of the body, Dr. Carter had difficulty determining the full extent of the injuries. While she couldn't rule out the possibility of sexual activity on the day of the disappearance, the level of decomposition made it impossible to confirm. Before the body was found, the area had been searched by police and community volunteers for several days, but nothing was discovered. A blue wheelie garbage can was spotted in nearby bushes, but its significance was not yet realized at that stage of the investigation. Volunteers searched the cemetery on August 20th at 9 p.m. and found a dumpster with a dark stain that they suspected might be blood. They took pictures and called the police, who arrived to inspect the dumpster. However, the police officers thought the dark stain was just dirt and noted that the dumpster looked new. With no evidence linking it to Lindsay's disappearance, they left it in place. Other clues were found in the cemetery but weren't immediately considered significant. Christine Alderson, a local resident, discovered a bloody cloth on the grass on August 18th while walking her dogs. She believed the blood was fresh but thought it might belong to a homeless man who often visited the area. Judith Bibby, another dog walker, reported seeing what was likely Lindsay's jacket hanging on a barbed wire fence near the Cardiel Hill Trail. On August 25th, investigators returned to the crime scene and discovered a yellow-handled saw and a pair of green heavy-duty gloves near Lindsay's grave. The gloves had blood on them and were sent for forensic testing. The test results showed that the gloves contained the perpetrator's DNA on the inside and Lindsay's DNA on the outside of the left glove. Additionally, investigators found a pair of Lindsay's Skechers sneakers in a blue plastic bag in the cemetery. The shoes had been cut along the sole. Further examination revealed that Lindsay's body was wrapped in plastic sheeting, with foliage and grass that didn't match the cemetery grounds between her body and the sheeting. This led investigators to believe that Lindsay's body had been moved from another location. The discovery of the moved body led detectives to recall a blue trash can that had caught the attention of volunteers. Upon reviewing CCTV footage, police officers made a surprising discovery that left the investigation team perplexed. Several images showed a young man pulling a blue wheelie garbage can in the Burley Road area over the course of a few days. A CCTV camera caught the same individual returning to the cemetery on 4 separate occasions. This footage helped identify a suspect. A video of the young man carrying a trash can down the street, possibly containing Lindsay's body, gained widespread attention. The video was broadcast on the news with a request for help identifying the individual, which proved successful. The individual in the video was identified as Rocky Marciano Rocky, a local resident who lived with his parents and 5 siblings on Winnie Hill Road in Arrington. The Rocky family had resided in this home for approximately 3 decades. Rocky struggled with a range of mental health issues, including autism, attention deficit disorder, and hyperactivity, which he had experienced since childhood. Additionally, his low IQ presented challenges with learning and communication. Rocky attended an alternative school in Barnoldswick several days a week, where teachers described him as a quiet and nonverbal student. In 2015, a psychologist evaluated Rocky and found he had difficulty understanding his emotions and how they related to events. A 2016 report noted that Rocky was unresponsive to strangers and required constant supervision. According to Timothy Bradley, a teacher at his school, Rocky showed little interest in academics, preferring practical activities. He rarely engaged in conversations, even about topics that interested him. Rocky was physically strong and enjoyed activities like going to the gym, caring for chickens, and playing Xbox. Rocky often seemed detached from reality and unaware of his actions. His attack on Lindsay Bubeck appeared to be motivated by a desire to kill a woman, and she happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. The murder was a random act committed by a stranger. On August 12, 2020, 1 year after the crime, Rocky Marciano Rocky went on trial. After an 8-day retrial and 4 hours of deliberation, the jury delivered a unanimous guilty verdict. Rocky, 17, showed no reaction via video link from Her Majesty's Prison, Wetherby. His parents, present in court, also remained expressionless. Rocky had pleaded guilty to aiding in the disposal of Lindsay's body but denied any role in her death. He claimed a male stranger approached him and offered a fee to help bury she. In a prepared statement, Rocky admitted to moving the garbage can and burying the body, but maintained he had no involvement in Lindsay's death. However, evidence collected from his home in Arrington, including identical plastic bags found at Lindsay's grave and a tracksuit matching the one he wore in surveillance footage from August 12, 16, and 17, contradicted his claims. Defense attorney Mark Van Hull stated to the jurors that although Rocky committed a reprehensible act by burying her body in the cemetery, he maintains that Rocky was not responsible for her death, despite the substantial evidence against him. The judge sentenced Rocky to life in prison with a minimum term of 16 years. He will be eligible for release only when the parole board determines he is no longer a danger to society. The judge described the attack as swift and brutal, and stated that Rocky clearly intended to kill a woman who was walking in the area just minutes before Lindsay's murder. Security footage shows that Rocky Price made 2 return visits to the location where Lindsay was killed on the evening of August 12. At 6:55 p.m., he was captured on CCTV carrying a black backpack, likely containing a saw to dismember the victim's body. At 8:28 p.m., he was seen at the same location, where he would eventually dispose of the body. With no visible signs of panic or distress, Rocky Price carried out a calculated plan to dispose of Lindsay's body. He carefully placed it in a blue trash can, wrapping it in 2 plastic bags, before burying it in a shallow grave at Arrington Cemetery. The fact that he stalked another woman before killing Lindsay Bubeck indicates that his crime was premeditated, rather than a spontaneous loss of control. Lindsay's funeral took place at St. Margaret's Church in Hapton on September 20th. Over 200 people attended the service, which was briefly interrupted by police stopping traffic on Manchester Road to allow Lindsay's coffin, adorned with flowers, to be carried into the church. The scene was filled with dozens of bouquets from friends, family, and strangers who were moved by Lindsay's story. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Abril Perez. Abril Perez was born on November 18, 1971, in Monterrey, northeastern Mexico, to parents Maria del Securo Sagan and Manuel Perez. She was the second of 3 children. Abril demonstrated exceptional mathematical and entrepreneurial abilities from a young age. She was a dedicated reader and consistently ranked as the top student in her class. As a teenager, Abril prioritized achieving financial independence, showcasing remarkable discipline and effective time management skills. Following high school, Abril attended the most prestigious university in New Leon, where she obtained a master's degree in finance and business administration. Her peers described her as intelligent, focused, and ambitious, while also being kind, cheerful, and always willing to assist others. After graduating, Abril secured a position in the sales department of one of the country's largest and fastest-growing companies. She later transitioned into digital sales, a rapidly expanding field, and discovered her true passion. Abril quickly rose through the ranks and became the executive director of the company within 2 years. Abril was a young, beautiful, and successful woman who was rapidly achieving her life goals. She had built a stellar career, supported her family, and had big plans for the future. However, her personal life was still unfulfilled, which worried her loved ones. Despite this, Abril was confident that she would find true love and live a long, happy life. But she had no idea how her future marriage to the seemingly perfect man would turn out. That man was Juan Carlos Garcia Sanchez, whom she met in the mid-1990s when her career was taking off. Juan Carlos was just 3 years older than Abril and shared her ambitious drive, which drew her to him. He, in turn, was captivated by her stunning looks, charming personality, kind heart, bright smile, sharp intellect, and remarkable determination. Juan Carlos graduated from a prestigious science and technology university, where he excelled in economics and trade. He then continued his studies at Harvard University in the United States. After returning to Mexico, he built a successful career in the emerging field of e-commerce. Juan Carlos and Abril met at a conference on the latest financial technologies. Their companies collaborated on several projects, allowing them to cross paths multiple times. Eventually, Juan Carlos realized he had developed feelings for Abril, who was intelligent and beautiful. He obtained her phone number through mutual acquaintances and asked her out on a date. Abril was also attracted to Juan Carlos, finding him to be educated, elegant, and engaging in conversation on a wide range of topics. Their relationship progressed rapidly, and by 1998, they decided to get married. At that point, they had both achieved significant success in their careers and were working on developing online stores, a field with great potential. Their life seemed like a fairy tale, inspiring envy and admiration from those around them. However, surface of their perfect family, there were some dark secrets. It wasn't until 2001, 3 years after their wedding, that they had their first child, a daughter named Ana Cecilia. The arrival of their child marked a new chapter in their lives. Her husband appeared happy, showing their newborn daughter love and admiration. 2 years later, Abril gave birth to a son, named Juan Carlos Jr., after his father. 2 more years passed, and the family had another child, a boy named Julio Andres. Despite having 3 young children, Abril hardly took any time off work and managed to balance parenting with career advancement. She made homemade meals, helped with schoolwork, took the children to sports activities, and aimed to be both a perfect mother and their best friend. Outwardly, the Perez Sanchez family seemed perfect, wealthy, successful, with 3 lovely children, and everything they could want. However, their home life remained a secret, even from their closest relatives, for a long time. In the early years of their relationship, Juan Carlos revealed his true personality to Abril. He had a short temper, was aggressive, and had a tendency to be overly harsh, refusing to compromise and insisting that everything be done his way. Initially, Abril was in love and believed that as time passed, Juan Carlos's rough edges would smooth out. Their shared projects brought them together, and their collaboration led to significant accomplishments, including financial success. However, as the years went by, Juan Carlos's irritability grew, and verbal arguments escalated into physical confrontations. Following the birth of their first daughter, he made a brief effort to control his emotions, but this change was short-lived. A similar attempt was made after the birth of their eldest son, but by the time their third child arrived, Juan Carlos no longer made any effort to be a good father or husband. Juan Carlos frequently directed his anger and frustration at Abril and disregarding her emotional well-being. He would insult and belittle her, the mother of his children, and seemed to feel better when she cried. He regularly physically harmed her, doing so in a way that left no visible marks, allowing her to hide the bruises with clothing or makeup. His goal was to maintain his reputation as a model family man, loving husband, and father. Abril kept quiet about the abuse for years, not even telling her sister and mother about the ongoing situation. She earned a good income and could have raised the children on her own, providing them with a good education and stable upbringing. However, her husband was wealthy and influential, and she knew he could use the courts to take the children away from her. Knowing Juan Carlos's true nature, Abril couldn't bear the thought of her children being left alone with him, as she considered him a monster capable of anything. When the family's situation reached a boiling point, what was once considered an ideal household now raised suspicions that something was terribly wrong. Abril was not just subdued, but deeply distressed and visibly struggling. She had lost weight, slept poorly, and frequently had bruises on her face and body that were becoming harder to hide and explain. Despite this, Juan Carlos appeared calm and confident in public, pretending that everything was fine. He played the role of a loving and caring husband, interacting with Abril politely and affectionately. However, at home, he transformed into a menacing figure. Despite loved ones urging Abril to divorce him, she insisted that everything was fine and that she could handle the problems with her husband on her own. 2014 marked the peak of Juan Carlos' career when he became the head of a major trading company, making him one of the most influential people in his field. Following this promotion, his family relocated to Mexico City, settling into a large house in one of the capital's upscale neighborhoods. Their children began attending an elite private school. Abril had genuinely hoped that this change of environment would improve their relationship. However, contrary to her expectations, the abuse continued. Juan Carlos often persisted in physically and verbally abusing his wife in front of their children. He increasingly accused her of infidelity without any basis for his claims. Whenever she tried to defend herself, he would resort to physical violence, insisting he would find evidence of her supposed disloyalty. Juan Carlos monitored her phone and emails, forbade her from using social media, and when finding no evidence, he hired a private detective to follow her and photograph any men who came near her. For 4 years, she tried every possible way to save her marriage. Despite her efforts, her husband's behavior became increasingly unbearable, creating a never-ending nightmare for her. To outsiders, however, their union appeared happy and successful, even enviable, due to her husband's wealth, influence, and seemingly caring nature. In 2018, the Juan Carlos and Abril visited to the Abril's family. During this trip, Juan Carlos treated his wife poorly in front of her parents, who were deeply disturbed by what they saw. This incident marked a turning point for Abril, and she realized that she could no longer continue living this way. She informed her husband that she would file for divorce as soon as they returned to Mexico City. Hearing this, Juan Carlos became enraged, grabbed her throat, and squeezed it so tightly that she nearly lost consciousness. Fortunately, her mother, Maria del Soro, entered the room and raised the alarm, preventing a tragedy. When the family returned to their home in the capital, Abril prepared for divorce and moved from the marital bedroom to a small guest room. However, this did not keep her safe from her husband's abuse. On January 4th, while Abril was still asleep, her husband entered the room holding a baseball bat. He struck her hard on the head and was about to swing again. Half awake, Abril barely understood what was happening, but she managed to roll off the bed just in time, saving her own life. She began to scream, and the children ran into the room, having heard the noise. The youngest son shielded his mother with his body, while the eldest son took the bat away from his father. Together, they fled the house and headed to the hospital, as Abril needed medical attention. Doctors diagnosed Abril with a severe concussion and a deep laceration above her eyebrow that required stitches. After Abril and their sons left the house, Juan Carlos contacted his lawyer to discuss the situation and asked for help in resolving the marital conflict. However, Juan Carlos also posted on social media, accusing his wife of betraying him by being unfaithful and planning to leave him for another man, taking their children and attempting to claim all their jointly acquired assets. Additionally, Juan Carlos claimed that Abril had stolen all the money from their home safe and had injured him with a knife when he tried to stop her. He posted photos of a bloodied knife and brown stains on the floor as evidence. However, the blood on the floor actually belonged to Abril from her own injury, and the knife photo was taken from the internet. Despite the fabrication, Juan Carlos's friends believed his story and actively shared and reposted his account on their social media pages, calling for widespread attention to this supposedly egregious case. Juan Carlos's attempt to kill Abril prompted her to take swift action. From her hospital bed, she filed a police report against him, accusing him of trying to take her life. After her release from the hospital, Abril packed up her 2 young sons and left the family home. Her oldest child, who was attending college in a nearby city, also condemned his father's violent actions. While waiting for justice, she started providing online support and consultations to women who were going through similar experiences. She also planned to open a center that would offer psychological and legal help to victims of domestic violence who had been failed by the justice system. It wasn't until 8.5 months after the incident, in September 2019, that Juan Carlos was finally arrested and charged with inflicting bodily harm and attempting to kill his wife. He was put in jail, where he spent over a month, but he managed to appeal the decision to keep him in detention before his trial. As a result, he was released from jail by November of that year. Judge Federo presided over the case, reclassifying it and ordering a new trial. During the trial, Abril's medical records and photos were not presented as evidence. Her and her son's testimonies were deemed insufficient to detain Juan Carlos, because he claimed Abril was manipulating their children against him. The judge released Juan Carlos, concluding his actions didn't pose a direct threat to Abril's life. Abril was shocked and terrified when Juan Carlos was released. She suspected he had bribed his way to freedom, putting her and their children in danger. She wrote to the judge, expressing her fear, but it had no immediate effect. Juan Carlos then initiated a custody battle, forcing Abril to return to Mexico City with their sons to attend court hearings. Abril arrived in Mexico City on November 25 with her children. She had a legitimate fear of her longtime partner and wanted to avoid him. To minimize the risk of an encounter, she planned to leave the city immediately after a court hearing that day. In fact, she had already bought the plane ticket, but Juan Carlos already knew that. After the court session, Abril, her sons, and their lawyer got into a car headed to the airport. However, they never made it to their destination. At a traffic light, a motorcyclist suddenly pulled up next to their car, drew a handgun, and fired 2 shots at Abril, who was sitting in the front passenger seat. The attacker then quickly fled the scene. A shooting occurred, and one of the bullets grazed the younger son, who was sitting in the back seat. Fortunately, none of the children were seriously injured. However, the injured Abril was rushed to the nearest hospital where doctors fought to save her life for more than 6 hours. Unfortunately, due to severe injuries and significant blood loss, they were unable to save her. Abril passed away that evening. The victim's family, including her parents, brother, and sister, immediately flew to the capital and urged authorities to arrest Juan Carlos, whom they believed was behind the brutal act. However, law enforcement had a different perspective, stating that without identifying the shooter, it was difficult to determine the motive behind the attack. They also noted that they could not confirm with certainty that the shooting was ordered by Juan Carlos. The tragic case of murder sparked widespread outrage and public debate. Abril's family successfully drew attention to the case, highlighting numerous instances where men had attempted to kill women but escaped punishment. In response to the public outcry, the Mexican General Prosecutor's Office launched a new investigation into the suspect, Juan Carlos Sanchez, and also examined the actions of the judges who had previously released him. The judges who had released Juan Carlos could face consequences for their role in the Abril death if his guilt was proven. Juan Carlos took to social media to demand justice for his former wife's murder. However, his daughter, Ana Cecilia, accused him of cruelty and shared photos of her mother's hospitalization after Juan Carlos had attacked her with a bat, contradicting her father's claims that he would never harm her mother. Despite the media attention surrounding the case, he was initially allowed to remain free during the investigation. However, he was required to check in with the police weekly and was placed under a restraining order. When he failed to appear at the scheduled time, a warrant was issued for his arrest for violating the order. As expected, Juan Carlos could not be found, and it was later discovered that he had used his wealth and connections to quickly leave the country and enter the United States. Mexican authorities contacted Interpol, reporting Juan Carlos as a fugitive accused of a serious crime, and he was subsequently declared wanted worldwide. Meanwhile, efforts were underway to locate criminals in Abril's assassination. Surveillance footage from street cameras revealed that the motorcyclist who committed the crime was not alone. Two vehicles were seen following the car carrying Abril. The motorcyclist appeared to be in constant communication with the occupants of these vehicles, receiving directions and instructions. After several months of investigation, some of the participants were identified, and on March 5, 2020, 2 suspects were arrested in connection with the case. To everyone's surprise, the suspects did not resist arrest and quickly began cooperating with authorities, hoping to receive lighter sentences. It was confirmed that Juan Carlos was the mastermind behind the crime, and he had paid a significant amount of money to individuals who were directly involved in the crime. The first to be caught were the driver of one of the getaway cars and the motorcyclist who fired the fatal shots. It was discovered that while Juan Carlos was in prison, he had hired 2 experienced criminals to act as his personal bodyguards. One of these bodyguards was released from prison a week before Juan Carlos, and the other was released several days after him. After being released from prison, Juan Carlos reconnected with his accomplices and asked them to recruit trustworthy individuals to help carry out the murder of a person in exchange for a large sum of money. Once all participants were in place, Juan Carlos provided detailed instructions about the intended victim's travel schedule and mode of transportation. However, luring his former wife to Mexico City proved to be a challenge. Juan Carlos used coercion, threatening to take their children unless she attended a court appearance. Despite attending the court date, his ex-wife intended to return to Monterrey on the same day, which Juan Carlos knew about through his sources. 3 more individuals involved in the conspiracy were arrested in late October 2020. Initially, they were taken into custody on suspicion of distributing controlled substances, but further investigation at the police station revealed their potential connection to the high-profile crime. The arrested individuals were part of a major drug trafficking gang led by Balto, who had previously served time with Juan Carlos and offered him protection. In exchange for a significant reward, Balto agreed to help Juan Carlos eliminate his ex-wife. A few weeks later, in November 2020, Maldonado, an individual involved in the case, was also arrested. During his testimony, he confirmed that Juan Carlos had sought out reliable individuals to kill his ex-wife and that he had agreed to assist in exchange for a substantial reward. The investigation confirmed that Juan Carlos was the mastermind behind the crime. His earlier attack on Abril with a stick was reclassified as an attempted murder. As a result, the court issued an arrest warrant for Juan Carlos on charges of femicide. However, his location remained unknown. By spring 2021, the remaining suspects involved in the murder of Abril were apprehended. One of them was already serving time for a separate crime. The searches also led to the discovery of the gun used to kill Abril. In total, 9 individuals linked to the same criminal organization were detained, with 7 of them directly involved in the pursuit and shooting of Abril. More than 4 years after the Abril murder, the mastermind behind the crime, Juan Carlos Garcia Sanchez, is still on the run and his location is unknown. Meanwhile, the man who fired the fatal shot has been convicted and sentenced to 52 years in prison. 2 accomplices who participated in the car chase and coordinated with the shooter have each been sentenced to 50 years. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Gabriela Alcano. Gabriela Alcano was born on May 17, 2001, in Santiago, the capital city of Chile. She was the only child of Frederico Alino and Carolina Donosa Campos, and the first grandchild in a large, close-knit family. Her paternal uncle, Rodrigo, who served as her godfather, and her grandfather, Carlos, both adored her deeply, with Carlos regarding her as the central figure in his life. Gabriela grew up in a loving and supportive environment, despite her family's modest means. Her parents, though not wealthy, worked hard to provide her with a good education and upbringing. When Gabriela was 5, her parents divorced, and she lived with her mother, who dedicated herself to raising her. Her father, however, remarried and had 2 younger sons, but he continued to support Gabriela and her mother financially and remained involved in her life. Gabriela was a sweet and friendly child, who was a bit shy but made friends easily. Her gentle nature and lovely appearance earned her admiration from those around her. She excelled academically, enjoyed music, dance, and art, and her parents encouraged her talents. Gabriela cherished her relationships with her younger half-brothers, spending quality time with them at her father's nearby home during weekends and holidays. Overall, Gabriela's childhood was a happy and carefree time, filled with love and support from her family. Gabriela's first love was at the age of 15. She fell for Fabian Chasis Aravan, a fellow student who was a year older. At first, their relationship was innocent and sweet. They would walk together, share ice cream, and steal kisses. Fabian came from a good family with well-respected parents who valued education and raised him to be a good person. However, Fabian was a quiet and private person who struggled with social interactions. He would avoid eye contact and turn away from others, leading many to think he was just shy. Gabriela's father met Fabian and thought he was a calm, dependable, and responsible young man. He had a serious talk with Fabian, asking him to take care of Gabriela, and Fabian promised to do so. Initially, Fabian made an effort to be attentive and caring. However, as time passed, a different side of Fabian emerged. He became controlling and cruel, revealing a darker aspect of his personality. Fabian's controlling behavior dominated the relationship. He was intensely jealous and dictated who Gabriela could and couldn't interact with. He monitored her phone activity, insisting on instant responses to his calls and messages, regardless of the time. If she failed to comply, he would throw tantrums, displaying childish and abusive behavior. During the first 6 months of their relationship, Gabriela attempted to downplay Fabian's frequent outbursts of anger and jealousy, believing they would eventually subside. Blinded by her love for him, she tried to meet all his demands and held on to the hope that he would revert to the caring and gentle person she initially fell in love with. Fabian's behavior became increasingly irritable, volatile, and aggressive. He emotionally drained Gabriela, progressing from verbal abuse to physical mistreatment. He would slap her, pull her hair, or grab her hands, often leaving no visible marks. However, bruises would occasionally appear on her wrists and shoulders, evidence of Fabian's rough handling. Gabriela tried to hide her situation, but her loved ones noticed her depressed state and frequent tears. She was no longer her usual cheerful and outgoing self, instead withdrawing from friends and avoiding contact with people Fabian had forbidden her from seeing. Gabriela repeatedly tried to end her relationship with Fabian, but he would not let her go. Despite her efforts to break free, he would pressure her into getting back together. This cycle of breaking up and reuniting continued for over a year, marked by Fabian's stalking, threats, and harassment. In 2017, Fabian got into trouble for physically attacking a classmate outside of school. Although the details of the incident were unclear, he was accused of mistreatment and assault, which could have led to jail time. However, the case was settled out of court, and Fabian was expelled from school. He was forced to complete his education through homeschooling. When Gabriella finally decided to end the relationship for good, Fabian became angry and desperate. He apologized and promised to change, begging her to take him back. However, when she refused, he began to stalk and harass her. He would show up at her school or home, even attempting to climb into her room through the window. He bombarded her with dozens of calls, texts, voice messages, and social media messages, trying to intimidate her into resuming their relationship. Gabriella was determined to end the relationship, despite Fabian's erratic behavior. His messages veered wildly from apologetic to threatening, but she remained resolute. However, Fabian's actions were unpredictable and frightening. He would often vanish for weeks, giving Gabriella a glimmer of hope that he had moved on, only to reappear and resume his harassment. Fabian's behavior was relentless and intrusive. He would follow Gabriella everywhere, showing up unexpectedly and causing public scenes. His outbursts were loud and intimidating, leaving Gabriella feeling anxious and fearful. As a result, she became reluctant to be alone, always seeking the company of friends or family after school. She would often meet her mother at work and travel home with her, or ask her father or uncle to accompany her on trips. This constant vigilance took a toll on Gabriella, leaving her exhausted and drained over several months. A devastating series of events began to unfold for the Elcano family when a burglar broke into the home of Federico's second wife, taking her life in a tragic turn of events. At the time, the children were at school and Federico was at work, leaving her alone and vulnerable. Fortunately, the perpetrator, a neighbor with a prior conviction, was apprehended immediately. Gabriella and her mother rallied around Federico, offering emotional support and helping him care for the children during this difficult time. Although Gabriella's thoughts were temporarily diverted from Fabian, who had gone missing around the same time, she remained focused on her own goals. She was busy preparing for entrance exams, hoping to secure a spot at one of Santiago's most prestigious universities, where she aspired to study journalism or advertising. However, this tragedy was only the beginning of a series of heartbreaking events that would soon befall the Elcano family. In May 2018, Fabian suddenly re-emerged, beginning a campaign of obsessive stalking that made Gabriella feel unsafe in all aspects of her life. He was able to access her property by climbing over the fence and even showed up at places she regularly visited, such as the supermarket and the mall. By early June, Gabriella was so alarmed by his behavior that she sent screenshots of her disturbing messages with Fabian to her two closest friends, including audio recordings where he explicitly threatened her and demanded they restart their relationship. Gabriella was secretly living in fear for her own safety and that of her loved ones, but she chose not to share her concerns with her family to avoid causing them unnecessary worry. On June 10, 2018, the Alino family came together to celebrate a milestone birthday, Carlos's 80th. Tragically, this joyful gathering would turn out to be the last day of life for Gabriella and her mother, Carolina. The evening had begun on a happy note, with the house filled with laughter, music, and the warmth of a big family meal. As they celebrated Carlos's special day, everyone wished him good health and many more years to come. Gabriella played with her younger brothers and her uncle Rodrigo's children, but despite the festive atmosphere, she seemed somewhat preoccupied and distant. Her uncle noticed her unease and decided to approach her, asking if everything was okay and if something was troubling her. Gabriella gave a sad smile and shrugged, but didn't explain why she was nervous. Her uncle chose not to pry, thinking she would open up when she was ready. However, he later regretted not pressing her for more information. After the party, Federico drove his ex-wife and daughter home. He kissed Gabriella on the forehead, told her he loved her, and reassured her that she could always count on him for support. He then returned home with his younger children. Tragically, this was the last time he saw his eldest daughter and first wife alive. In the early hours of June 11th, a horrific crime took place. Fabian, armed with a hunting knife, climbed over the fence of his ex-girlfriend's house. He planned to sneak into Gabriella's bedroom through the window and attack her. However, just as he was about to enter, the lights turned on, and the back door creaked open. Carolina, who had been unable to sleep, had gotten up to investigate the noise. Fabian pounced on her, pushing her back inside, and began stabbing her repeatedly. Fabian brutally stabbed his Carolina 36 times, with most of the wounds inflicted on her chest, neck, and head. This attack was fatal and left her with no chance of survival. Carolina only managed to scream a couple of times before falling silent. The noise from the attack woke up Gabriella, who rushed downstairs to see what was happening. As she went down, she saw Fabian, covered in blood and clearly enraged. He caught hold of her and dragged her down. Gabriella was desperately trying to call the emergency services with her phone, but she couldn't make the call. In a horrific act, Fabian attacked Carolina and stabbed her once in the chest, piercing her heart and instantly killing her. He then moved her body to the kitchen. After the murder, Fabian tried to cover his tracks by wiping away his fingerprints and cleaning the bloody footprints. He also washed himself and the knife in the bathroom. After cleaning up, Fabian left the house quietly around 5:30 a.m. without being noticed by the neighbors. Following the event, Federico appeared unaffected. However, concerns grew when Carolina, typically a reliable and communicative colleague, missed work for 2 consecutive days without answering her phone. Her employer contacted Federico, asking him to find out what had happened to Carolina. When questioned, Federico was surprised and claimed to have called Carolina, but she was unreachable, as was Gabriella, whose phone was off. Next, Federico phoned his brother, Rodrigo, but Rodrigo stated that he had neither seen nor heard from the missing individuals since their friend's birthday. Following the phone call, Federico decided to pay a visit to Carolina's home. The property appeared uninhabited. Nonetheless, Carolina's vehicle remained in the garage. Without forcibly entering, despite possessing a spare key, Federico merely checked on the status of the property. Federico called the police and asked them to check the house, but he didn't enter himself because he was afraid of what he might find. The police officers were puzzled by this, especially since he had a key. When they finally entered the house at 11 a.m., they found the lifeless bodies of Carolina and Gabriella on the kitchen floor, surrounded by pools of blood. Despite the obvious fact that the women had been dead for over a day, Federico was overcome with grief and irrationally demanded that the police call an ambulance to save them. The police had to calm Federico down, but his behavior raised suspicions, and they took him outside to a police car for questioning. When he tried to leave the car and found the door locked, he became agitated and demanded to know why. It was then that he realized he was the main suspect in the double homicide. Federico was shocked and devastated by this turn of events, unable to comprehend how he could be suspected of killing his own daughter. Rodrigo arrived shortly after and was equally shocked to learn that his brother had not been released. He was also struggling to come to terms with the investigation revealed that Gabriella's friends reported that she was being stalked by her ex-boyfriend, Fabian. Screenshots of his threatening messages and voice recordings, which included a disturbing phrase, "It's easier to take her life than to let her go," were also obtained. This came as a shock to Federico, Gabriella's father, who recalled that Fabian seemed pleasant when they first met, despite his daughter's failed attempts to break up with him. The contrast between the heinous crime and the normalcy of Fabian's daily life, where he spent time with family and friends and posted light-hearted photos on social media, made his crime all the more inconceivable. After being taken into custody, Fabian responded to allegations with pretended astonishment and anguish, falsely claiming his innocence and feigning affection for Gabriella. Fabian had gotten rid of the object used to commit the murder and thrown away some clothes with blood on them. However, There were still small drops of blood on his shoes, and footprints matching his shoes were found at the scene of the crime. Additionally, 4 of Gabriella's classmates said they heard Fabian threaten her, saying it would be easier to kill her than let her go. Because of the evidence and what the witnesses said, Fabian admitted to the crime, but tried to make himself look like a lover who was deeply hurt. The defendant claimed that his intention was not to harm Gabriella, but rather to have a conversation with her. However, the situation escalated, and he ultimately treated her mother as an unwanted witness. He struggled to provide a reasonable explanation for bringing a hunting knife to the encounter, which was supposedly meant to be a conversation. Following the autopsy and other necessary examinations, the victims' bodies were released to their family for burial. A large crowd gathered at the funeral to pay their respects to the deceased and offer condolences to their loved ones. Gabriella was laid to rest in a white dress she had always wanted to wear but never had the chance to. Coralina was buried in a closed casket due to the severe mutilation of her face. Fabian's family hired a skilled lawyer who developed a strong defense strategy, aiming to secure a minimal sentence for his client. During the initial court hearings, the lawyer highlighted Fabian's young age and clean record, pointing out that the attack on his classmate had been resolved outside of court. However, the victim's family pushed for a more severe charge of femicide, which was rejected by the prosecution due to the specific requirements of Chile's law. Since Fabian and the victim were not in a romantic relationship at the time of the crime, the case did not meet the criteria for femicide. The lawyer also argued that Fabian had acted on impulse and was in a state of distress when he committed the crime. As a result, Fabian faced a potential 15-year sentence for the double homicide and assault charges. The victim's family, understandably, demanded the maximum punishment for Fabian. After the initial hearings, the judge gave both the prosecution and defense 6 months to gather evidence. Fabian's lawyer requested his release pending trial, but the judge denied this request, keeping Fabian in custody. Gabriella's father was furious. He lost 2 loved ones to violent deaths. Now, the person responsible for the murders of his ex-wife and daughter might receive a lenient sentence. The defense lawyer tried to blame the victims, and the authorities seemed willing to accept this excuse. In response, Gabriella's father and uncle, along with women's rights groups, proposed Gabriella's Law. This law would broaden the definition of femicide to include intimate partner violence, regardless of whether they was married or cohabiting. The National Office for Women and Gender Equality soon joined the cause, actively pushing for the law. Although the bill faced opposition due to concerns that it could lead to new charges and stricter penalties for perpetrators already in prison, feminist groups nationwide rallied behind the Alino family. They organized marches and demonstrations in support of Gabriella's Law. In August 2019, a year and 3 months after the tragic murders, significant changes were made to Chile's femicide law. Known as Gabriella's Law, these amendments aimed to strengthen the country's response to violence against women. The law now defines femicide as any act of violence, injury, or murder committed against a woman due to hatred based on her gender, regardless of the relationship between the victim and the perpetrator. Additionally, the law considers it an aggravating circumstance if the victim is a minor or has health issues. In April 2022, Fabian Series went on trial for attacking his ex-girlfriend and her mother 4 years earlier. Thanks to Gabriella's Law, the defense had limited options. Fabian was charged with femicide under aggravating circumstances because one of the victims was a minor, as well as with double homicide and assault. On April 20th, he was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. After the verdict was delivered, Federico and Rodrigo spoke to the court, expressing their gratitude to the judges for their fair decision. They acknowledged that no punishment could restore the life of their loved ones, Carolina and Gabriella, but emphasized that a life sentence for the perpetrator would serve as a safeguard, protecting other women from suffering a similar tragic fate.